Nice. All right. Well, David, we know that Magnus Carlsen is a huge football fan, but who would have known that one of the biggest stars in the Premier League is actually a chess fan?
Who would have thought it? A Chelsea player playing chess. He revealed he plays in the changing rooms with other players.
Yeah.
It's impressive, and chess and football, they go hand in hand together.
Definitely, and Christian Pulisic, we will challenge him in the Play Magnus Charity Challenge today. And we're not going to reveal too much, David, but you were really impressed with his play.
I was super impressed. I can't wait for the audience to see this, because chess players, normally, they're not that great at football, but footballers being good at chess, that is a real shock.
Of course, it's also about the chess today. Welcome, everyone, to the quarterfinals in the Charity Cup.
Wow, what has just happened there?
Whoa!
He's completely hallucinated against the action.
Whoa! Look at the bar!
Checkmate is just coming.
What a game! Wow.
There's no way to stop it. Plus 100 for black.
He's taking
Whoa! He's done it.
Mind of the computer, Magnus Carlsen.
Yeah.
Rook is under fire. 2 seconds again by Eric. Oh, he made the move.
Why doesn't it work?
Because you did-
Rook takes bishop. Rook takes bishop. Play quickly.
Magnus Carlsen showing his genius in this final.
Incredible day of chess.
Eight players remain in the Charity Cup, and in addition to $25,000, the winner will take home this NFT trophy. And the trophy is also available in a unique fan edition for the highest bidder, with a bunch of perks coming with it. Among others, a lifetime of Chess24 Premium and Chessable Pro. And proceeds from this auction will go to UNICEF. Now, the Charity Cup is the last chance to qualify for the first major in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. So let's take a look at the current tour standings. Top 8 players on this list will be qualified for that first major starting on April 22nd. So it is now all about making it to the semifinals in the Charity Cup to gain important prize money. And our 8 players will face each other in one-day quarterfinal matches with 4 rapid games, best out of those 4 rapid games. And if it is tied, we will head straight to tiebreaks with Blitz and potentially Armageddon today. We started out with 16 players, and on the final intense day of preliminaries yesterday, 8 of those players had to leave us. But for Magnus Carlsen, it was a fight to gain that #1 spot.
These 2 black knights, monsters. If one of them's traded off, the position only opens up, and look at White's king still stranded.
Oh yeah, he hasn't castled yet.
No, he hasn't castled.
I don't think he will. Wow, Liam has just sacrificed materials. It's chaos. White's pawn's pushing forward, black's pawn's pushing forward. Magnus could go for this pawn. No, he attacks the white bishop instead. There's a threat after threat every single move, and black is ahead on material. Okay, it's 1 pawn versus 1 pawn.
Whoa, look at the bar.
That's the thing. And
And Magnus reacts. Has he blundered the win?
You think he's blundered the win?
Liam escapes. It's king versus king. It's a draw.
Do the same score.
Whoa.
Oh, sorry.
What is this?
What a move.
Genius.
Just to have this move on your radar is incredible. We were looking at the king side. We were looking at the black king. He just picked up his rook in the corner and threw it up the board, sacrificing it in this angle. He's too good for this age. What a player, Pragnananda. He used all the angles. He used this a7 square on the left side. He's using the corner on this side. He's dropping his knight back to the bottom of the board. He's literally played on all 4 sides of the board in order to win this game. And it's simply a checkmate threat from the white queen and white rook over the next couple of moves. And but okay, he gives a check, allowing the black king to hide on the side. Okay, what is his idea? Because now black threatens checkmate in 1. Rook takes knight will be checkmate. And whoa, okay, crazy tactics. Prag is just showing off now with some nice geometry, and I think we're about to see a result, because king takes rook now. It's a check. King takes rook would walk into a knight fork. White's knight will plant itself in the center, checking the black king and winning the black queen. This is just one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen, let alone on the tour. It's just a masterpiece. Fireworks non-stop. Every move is a really crazy, unexpected blow. This knight fork, winning the black queen, ends in Van Foreest's resignation.
But unfortunately, young Pragnananda. He was knocked out 1 point away from making it to the quarterfinals, but he did end up in 10th place in the preliminaries. It was David Navarra who took that final 8th place to go through to the knockout stage. Hans Niemann in 7th place also made it through. On top of the table, Liam Le had a fantastic first 4 days in the tournament. To get that number 1 spot, Magnus Carlsen, 3 points behind in 2nd place, and in the studio to guide us now through the knockout stage and the quarterfinals. As always, International Master Ivanka Houska, Grandmaster David Howell. And Ivanka, who do you now hold as the favorite to win the Charity Cup?
And that's a difficult one because we've seen several players on form. Liam Le, he had an epic preliminaries, and then Jordan van Forest, well, his play was just wild. But I still have to say, Magnus Carlsen just edges it because he's so good at these knockout formats.
And who has been the biggest surprise to you, David, making it to the knockouts?
I'm mostly surprised by Magnus's opponent in these quarterfinals, Hans Niemann. He's only 18. He maybe hasn't hit these heights before in the past, and this feels like a big breakthrough event for him, surprising us, getting through with some great wins, and maybe he'll cause even more surprises today. Who knows?
Yeah, let's take a look at the quarterfinal matchups, you guys. 4 matches. They will play 4 rapid games in each of their matches, and I'm especially noticing Ding Liren, world number 3, but he's up against Jordan van Forest, who's played some really cool games in the preliminaries.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a really tough match for Ding Liren because he's not only playing someone who is in form, he's also playing at a very difficult time. And he's playing 1 in the morning all the way through to 5 o'clock. And that's going to be difficult, and it's going to start taking its toll.
Yeah. But we're going to start following the game between Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann. Magnus Carlsen, world champion, up against a very inspired 18-year-old. And after we've seen this very first game today, we're going to show you the next Play Magnus charity challenge with Premier League Chelsea star Christian Pulisic.
Hey guys, I'm Christian Pulisic from Chelsea FC and the US men's national team, and I'm playing in the Play Magnus charity challenge.
Game on.
Okay, he's moving fast.
Easily blocked though. Christian's spotting everything so far. Oh, look at the focus.
Yeah.
Castle my king.
Really professional game. Wow, he's stopping every single threat that Magnus is creating. Christian's got a great position, I've got to say. I like it. Magnus is running out of ideas, retreating pieces, retreating a bishop.
Make a quick move, Christian.
Out of time.
Oh, wow.
Thank you so much for having me.
Puma will donate $500 per move that Christian lasts in this game against Magnus, 10 years old. $500. All that money will be donated to UNICEF. And also, Christian's been really kind and given us a pair of his signed football boots that we will put up for auction on cctauction.com. Actually, some bids have already started to come in. $325 is the current bid. And we do have a little secret about these football boots as well, but we're going to tell you that after the first game. But, I mean, what a prize, David.
What a prize. I'm tempted to bid myself.
Yeah.
I could do with a bit of football practice using these boots, and look how nice they are. Yeah, really nice gesture from Christian Pulisic there, and also by Puma.
Definitely. And also, if you're not going to participate in the auction, you can still help UNICEF, help the people of Ukraine by donating to our fundraiser.
Yeah, and you can do so by going to the webpage www.chess24.com/donate, or alternatively, you can get your mobile phone out and you can scan the QR code or take a picture of it, and the QR code will take you to the page.
Absolutely. So far, more than $70,000 have been given by you guys to this fundraiser. So please keep on giving to help UNICEF. It is important that we help now the people in and around Ukraine affected by the war. And now we're going to take a look at the 8 players left in the Charity Cup. They are spread out all over the world, sitting in their homes. And Ding Liren, I mean, he is a big favorite against Jordan van Forest, but have we seen that, Ivanka? That the time of day has been a challenge for him playing at night?
Yeah, we have definitely seen that. I mean, especially thinking back to the Air Things Masters, he qualified quite convincingly to the quarterfinals, and there he actually lost the last 2 games in his knockout match, and that cost him his place in the semis. And it was just due to tiredness, I think.
But for Hans Niemann, he is sitting in the US at a comfortable hour during the day. And David, what is it about his play that has made him capable of making it to the knockouts?
I think it's just the fight that he's fighting in every game. He's taking risks, which sometimes backfire. We saw that happen, but more often than not, his risks have paid off. And I just think it's the fearlessness. It's just the some kind of crazy, unexpected moves that have really helped him get to this stage. And he needs to do the same against Magnus. If he just goes into end games, no chance. He needs to surprise the world champion and hope that some of those gambles pay off.
And for the 18-year-old Hans Niemann is going to be one of the biggest highlights of his career so far, playing a match against world champion Magnus Carlsen.
A year ago, I was 25, maybe 20. I was barely a grandmaster. I had just got rejected from my dream school, you could say. So 1 year ago, things were looking pretty bleak. But to be at this moment, to play Magnus in a match and make it to the top 8, and this is definitely, in some cases, a dream come true. So obviously I will just cherish the moment, because the fact that I'm even a professional chess player now is a complete miracle. It would have been so easy for me to be a professional streamer or go to college, but the fact that I've been given this opportunity to be a professional chess player, I'm very grateful for, and will make the most of.
He's made huge progress over the last year, Hans Niemann, and still a teenager. Askild, does the Americans have a future chess superstar here?
Absolutely. I mean, he could potentially be one of the new guys coming through. They have some old players now, in Aronian. He switched federations. Nakamura is getting older, and so on. So hopefully he can be one of the new guys coming through in the next few years.
Definitely. And he started out the Charity Cup as one of the lower-rated players. But let's take a look at the current tour ratings. I mean, he's made a huge leap, this young American.
Yeah, as we can see, he's up to 2655, gaining 31 rating points. And I wouldn't be surprised that if we in the future would see him cross that 2700 mark. And if we look at Magnus, he's down actually 5 rating points, even though I would say he has had a decent tournament so far. And again, it just shows how difficult it is to maintain such a high rating.
And of course, look at Jordan van Foreest and David Anton as well. What a tournament they're having.
Yeah, brilliant tournament so far. I've been quite impressed by Jordan playing some exciting chess. David Anton showing some fighting spirit. So happy to see some new faces qualifying now for the knockout stage.
And talking about fighting chess index, let's take a look at those stats as well. And first of all, what are these stats telling us, the fighting chess index?
Different components. First of all, it's rewarding players with decisive games. So it's a measurement of, not rewarding players who play a lot of draws. So if you have decisive games, that's always good. And also, it takes a look at your draws. So if it's short draws or longer draws, if it's a longer draw, you will be rewarded because you kept playing for many moves. Exactly. And towards the end of the season, there will be a prize for the fighting chess winner.
Deservedly. Yeah. And look at Hans Niemann. He is in second place. Over 70 is his score on the fighting chess index. And Magnus Carlsen is also top 8. So can we really hope for a cool fighting match between these two?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on paper, Magnus is obviously the big favorite.
Yeah.
But Hans Niemann is full of confidence. And if he managed to just win one game in this match against Magnus, that would be the greatest achievement of his chess career so far. So I fully expect to see fighting, exciting chess.
Yeah, and basically, what kind of chess style is Magnus Carlsen up against in Hans Niemann?
I mean, David mentioned it. He likes to create some chaos on the board, get dynamic positions, active pieces. While we all know Magnus' playing style, if you go for the dry positional positions, he will be grinded down in the end. So he needs to create some tactics maybe on the board, some counterplay, and try and beat Magnus in those type of positions.
Cool. The quarterfinals in the Charity Cup is about to start, you guys. Today, another 4 players will leave us, and 4 will go through to tomorrow's semifinals. We see David Navarra getting ready for his quarterfinal. David Anton is also ready. We will follow Magnus Carlsen against Hans Niemann in the first game. And do you expect chaos in that battle, David?
I definitely do. I think at some point Hans will just have to take risks, as Askill mentioned. If Magnus is just able to assert control, there won't be much chance for the American teenager. He needs to do something a bit wild, something a bit crazy, maybe stemming from the opening. I think a lot of the later battle will depend on the opening choice. I think Hans, especially with the black pieces, needs to choose his openings very carefully, very wisely.
Hans snacking up, getting his energy up before this tough fight. One of the highlights in his chess career so far against world champion Magnus Carlsen. We've seen him be very confident, Jovanka, but do you think he's feeling nerves now? He knows the world is watching this.
I think he'll be enjoying this moment in the limelight, you know, because there's nothing wrong with dreaming big. There's nothing wrong with having these big aspirations. And in chess, it's so important to be confident. He has to believe in his abilities, especially if he's going to match the world champion. The only thing that I would say is he needs to be a little bit careful and just spot those tactical moments.
Okay, and we start with the Reti opening. White developing the knight out first, and then just pushing the pawn next to it to create a nice, safe space for the white bishop to fianchetto itself on a long diagonal. So we've seen this before from Magnus, actually, I think 2 or 3 times already this tournament.
Yeah.
And Hans, surely he won't be too surprised. Black occupying the center with pawns, white meanwhile staying a bit more flexible, just getting the white king castled usually first before deciding what pawns to push in the center. Are you surprised, Jovanka, that Hans is even thinking at this point, at this moment?
Yes, I am surprised that he's thinking, actually, because, like you say, Magnus has actually played this before. I mean, primarily, I'm thinking of his game against Jan-Krzysztof in the first round. But having said that, Magnus has actually been playing more of the king's pawn forward this tournament, so maybe he's just having a pause and considering what to do. So he decides instead to develop his dark squared bishop.
Yep, so this is all very well-known territory and actually complete symmetry right now. The players kind of copying each other. White is the first to castle. Most likely black will do the same. There we go. Complete symmetry. This is one of the most frustrating things in chess when your opponent copies exactly what you do. I remember when I was first starting to play, my opponents would just do this and it just confused me. It got in my mind. But Magnus has had this position before in this tournament against Jordan van Foreest.
Exactly, yeah.
So he knows what's going on here. Magnus actually offers a pawn sacrifice. It's kind of the queen's gambit, but delayed, and the gambit wasn't accepted. Black didn't capture a pawn, and now everything protected for white. White has a small space advantage because he has 2 pawns on the 4th rank, and black is mainly trying to just build a solid wall himself. And Hans just looking off to the left there. He's trying to remember what he's analysed. For sure, this position isn't new to him. He's probably studied 3 or 4 different plans for black, and he's just trying to pick between them. OK, in the end, he brings his bishop out. And we'll see the moves continue to be played fast. This is still a very well-known kind of theoretical position. So white's fianchettoed both of the bishops. I like the setup just because the white bishops will come to life later on. But meanwhile, Hans, OK, pushing this pawn 1 square. That's quite rare.
That is rare. I mean, only 3 games in my particular database. It is kind of a little bit of a normal strategy, though, to kind of take control of the light squares and just prepare to push the B pawn 2 squares forward and to try to force white to determine the pawn tension.
Mm-hmm. So most likely, black will put all the pawns on light squares, and OK, white bringing the knight out. Meanwhile, very sensible by Magnus, and black also developing. And yeah, later on, black will just build a wall. Maybe every single pawn will be on a light square, and it's just going to be hard for Magnus to break through that barrier. So yeah, if you notice, all of black's pawns right now, apart from 1, is on a light square. I'm pretty sure Hans will try and play that move at some point later.
Yeah, having said that, you know, it just reminds me of something that happened with one of my team captains when I was playing in the European Team Championship or the Olympiad. They would joke, oh, Jovi and her light square strategy. She puts all her pawns on that square. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's true. I do.
Now with black, all of your openings...
all of them involve putting my pawns on light squares.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know how it worked out that way, but it did. And I can recommend it.
Yeah, there's different types of openings. For example, the Slav defense or the Queen's Gambit declined. You put all your pawns on light squares. There are other openings where you put all your pawns on dark squares, like the King's Indian, the Old Indian. There's lots of different...
And is it a good idea to, so say you want to use maybe 3 different kind of openings, to use the ones that actually put the pieces on the same color? Is it, some pattern recognition, something you can get out of it?
Yeah, you definitely can. Like, for instance, whenever I've faced against the Queen's pawn opening, I've always put my pawns on light squares, and the same goes if I've faced against the King's pawn opening. And I can, at occasions, interchange those plans that accompany the pawn structure.
Yeah.
It's just... I think it's just somehow a little bit strange, and it just means that I can also play other openings that involve putting my pawns on those light squares.
Yeah, and often when you start with the black pieces, the main goal is just surviving the opening. In order to win with black, you first have to equalize the position, and then you look for small imbalances, and then you try and play for a win later in the game. So in order to just survive the opening, it is quite a good strategy to put a pawn in the center, back it up with other pawns, and that's what Hans is doing right now. So he's just trying to equalize the position. According to the evaluation bar, he's done that, and now we just reach a middle game where it's all about maneuvering. Still every single pawn, every single piece on the board, and it's about who can put their pieces on better squares, who can activate, who can go for pawn exchanges, piece exchanges at the right moment. And the game will take a bit of a slower turn for the next few moves, while maybe Hans comes up with a plan, while the players debate which pieces to move, where to put them. But after that, as we saw in Magnus's game against Jordan, things do tend to explode a bit later in the middle game. Still very early stages and very tense right now.
I have to say I was a little bit surprised by Hans developing his knight, because I actually expected the knight to jump into the centre. And the reason why I would expect the knight to jump into the centre and offer itself up for trade is because if you look at black's position, it's somehow a little cramped. And there's this little thing that when you're suffering in terms of space, you try to swap off minor pieces. And the expression that I've heard and I use, and actually comes from Jesse Cray. And it says, you send your children to boarding school. Too many occupants in the house, so you send the kids off to school, and it just makes life easier.
So one idea that Hans uses right now is your one, Jovanka. Yeah, trade off a set of knights. And actually, space tends not to be an issue in any type of pawn structure once you've exchanged one set of minor pieces, knights or bishops. So black's pieces, if you look at the black knights, previously they were just fighting for the same squares. Now that's no longer the case. They're not in each other's way. We call them superfluous knights. One is often just useless if it can't occupy the square it wants to use, if its fellow knight is actually sitting on that square. So if your knights are in the way of each other, swap one knight off, the other knight becomes much happier.
What was the word?
Superfluous. It means kind of
superfluous knight.
I always
unnecessary
forget.
or useless knight.
Superfluous knights.
Yeah, it's a complicated word, and I always forget it. You know, it's not one that rolls off the tongue. But yeah, it's a good word to know. And
you can be impressed if I ever ask you, oh, David, is this a superfluous knight?
I look forward to that moment.
Yes.
And meanwhile, just the last move, both sides bringing their rooks to the c-file, just in anticipation of things opening up. Still, it feels like both sides are kind of tiptoeing around. They're a bit scared to initiate any real trades, any real action. But the moment will come, and we'll keep updated with that.
It's typical first game in a knockout match.
Yeah, everyone's a bit cagey. You don't quite know how it's going to go. So you kind of just play a little bit slowly and wait for the action to start brewing at a later stage. And talking about action and entertainment, we still want everyone at home to be enthusiastic and excited about the chess. And we very much want you at home to be part of this experience. So please tweet us your thoughts, your move suggestions, even your selfies. We really love those. Remember to take them in landscape mode. And you can do all this by tweeting us using the hashtag #ChessChamps.
I'm really interested to see where people are following the chess now. Obviously, time of day is very different for our viewers. Someone is it's at night. Someone is working hours. Are you watching at school? Your job? Are you sitting at home? Are you home officing? Because of course COVID is slowly going away. So maybe people are starting to go back to the office and watching with some colleagues.
But hopefully they're not watching at school, because that would be a little bit naughty. And we don't advocate bunking off some lessons to watch our show.
But we won't tell the teacher.
That is, unless we read out their tweets. And their teacher is also in the staff room.
I want to know who people are supporting as well, because I know Hans has a huge online following. He was a streamer for many years in the US. He's very, very popular. Of course, releasing courses, doing lots of things these days. And, OK, Magnus, army of fans himself. So they're just shuffling his queen to a slightly better square. More importantly, though, it's not where the queen is placed, it's the fact that the white rooks are connected. And when your rooks are connected, they become much more flexible. Later, you can actually stack them up on the same line. For example, white might try and double his rooks on the c-file, or white's other rook will come, the one next to his king, it will come to the center, to the square the white queen previously sat on, because if things do open up, rooks in the middle of the board are far stronger than if they sit on their kind of home squares. So still very cagey, just dancing around each other. And at this moment, it feels like Hans maybe will initiate this knight trade because he's running out of other moves. The black queen can come out on her diagonal. Okay, he backs up his knight.
And here we have the old superfluous knight, Kaja. Take a look at that knight sitting blocking in the dark squared bishop. It wants to jump into the center, but lo and behold, its sibling is standing there. So that's why it's called superfluous knight.
Yeah, they both want to use this square, but only one knight can occupy that square at the right time. So, yeah, his idea is to actually get rid of one of them. For example, if Magnus moves the rook as we expected, just lining his rooks up on central files. Okay, instead he's moved his knight into the center, but I'm pretty sure Hans needs to get rid of one of these two knights now. They're just in each other's way. So trade one of them off. There we go. It happens. He's going to take this one off and then replace it in the center with his other knight. And those superfluous knights have been separated now. And
he still has a knight on that great square.
Exactly. It's not quite an outpost. It might get kicked away later by a pawn. But first, you were attacking this bishop, so the bishop steps back. And Hans, if he wants, can actually evict the white knight from the center as well with a pawn push. You've got to weigh up the pros and cons. You might kick away this white knight, but suddenly after the white knight retreats, your bishop will be blocked in behind a pawn. So pros and cons, you've got to weigh that up. And you also got to weigh up when the black knight steps back, because it will have to at some point due to white's pawn push. And okay, Hans, meanwhile, he's going for it. He's bringing his queen out. Some vague threats now, capturing a pawn. You don't want to get your queen trapped, of course. You've got to be very careful that pawn isn't poisoned. But at least he's creating threats. He's forcing the world champion to go onto the back foot. And the evaluation bar shooting up in white's favour. It's not clear why. But
I don't like it. Sorry.
You don't like black's move?
I don't like black's move at all. I'm thinking that, you know, maybe kick back the knight. And, you know, my favourite plan, basically when the knight moves, say moves back, OK, well, operation kickback continues. And I'm going to kick you back one more time.
How do you Ivanka? This pawn push?
I was going to kick back the knight. I was going to kick you there. And then, yeah, once you even move backwards, and then I'm thinking, you know, hey, let's begin. Let's maybe push the A3 pawn, the A2 pawn. You
can maybe even kick back the black queen with your bishop. Yeah. The black queen steps back. You kick back the black bishop.
Exactly.
The black bishop steps back, and suddenly we talked about being cramped. Look at black's pieces; they're really suffocating here, struggling for air, struggling for space. And yeah, that operation has begun. Actually, you're right, Ivanka. Everything comes with tempo. In chess, we talk about tempo. It means you force a move, you gain time on every turn. First, you kick back the knight. The knight steps back. Maybe it won't go the direction I mentioned because of your idea. But if it does step back here, which it wants to use the square, then suddenly you gain another tempo, forcing the opponent's reply, having to go back. You gain another tempo, forcing the opponent's reply. They have to go back. And again, once more, gaining all the time in the world. Every piece coming with a threat, every move coming with a threat. And yeah, in this position, maybe Hans just missing the moment. He wants to come and take this pawn, but just no time to do that. And yeah, first of all, your knight is under attack. And not too many safe squares. I don't think you can jump into the position. You want to, of course, protected by your queen, but this knight just gets trapped. And for example, this is a double attack, hitting the black queen, hitting the black knight as well. So you have to go back. And if you have to go back, it's a bad sign. You've lost time. So yeah, Magnus really kind of sensing the moment and starting Operation Kickback.
And it's a very familiar plan to Magnus. I've seen him do it many times. I remember seeing him do it to Jan and Pomniachi in Norway Chess in their playoff match. And I had a word with Magnus afterwards, and I was like, why didn't Pomniachi allow that? And he said, yeah, it was a bit strange, wasn't it? So I was very proud of myself when I spotted this, that I was on the same wavelength as the world champion.
Yeah, and yeah, it's very standard, it's very natural as well. And I think Hans now, the reason he's been thinking for 2 minutes is he's realised he's in maybe not massive trouble, he's not losing or anything, but he's really going to have to start just retreating everything and going back to square one. And OK, Okay, he goes back in this direction. So at least he doesn't lose time having to retreat his knight again after any pawn pushes. But I'm expecting Magnus to start either hitting that black light square bishop, as we showed with the pawn, or maybe even driving back the black queen with white's dark square bishop.
Yeah, I like attacking the queen. You know, the queen is doing nothing there. You might as well get a free move. And then again, you still have the plan of Operation Expansion with the pawns. So I really do think that Nepomniachtchi, where did I get that from?
Oh, we just
Because of
talked about it.
Yeah, I know. Hans Niemann is struggling a little bit, too cramped.
Yeah, maybe they both begin with N, right? Niemann, Nepomniachtchi.
Yeah, too many things going on in my brain. And whilst Magnus is pondering whether to initiate Operation Kickback or not, I do want to share with you some selfies that we've already got.
Oh, wow.
Oh, well, wait 1 second. It is Kickback, but it is Central Expansion.
Yeah, that's greedy, gaining all the space, pushing a pawn, hitting black's bishop, and the black bishop had to retreat. You notice in the center there's some tension between some pawns, but every white pawn is protected by another pawn. So white has this kind of nice formation. All of white's pawns, if you notice, they're pointing towards the center. Black doesn't want to trade anything off because that would only help open up white's pieces. And Magnus there, after the black bishop retreated, dropping back his knight. And I'm trying to work out whether black can be super greedy here. The black queen sitting on the side of the board, she could go and grab a pawn, but it feels like that is almost suicidal. It feels like the black queen would get trapped if that happens.
It does look like that, right?
Yeah. We have to jump in because this is actually a pawn sacrifice by the world champion. We showed that this pawn push, attacking the black bishop, drove the bishop back, and a really subtle retreat. So white's knight now is actually quite flexible on this square. It's a dream square in a lot of queen's pawn openings. He wants to go this way maybe to take the bishop. He wants to go maybe this way forward and to capture the bishop. And if, as mentioned, black takes this pawn, which I would be very tempted to do because I'd be scared of the position anyway as black. You might as well have something to suffer for. But I think Magnus's idea is possibly to jump forward with his knight to this square. And now not only do you attack this bishop, not only do you attack this pawn, but you also threaten to trap this black queen. And yeah, the reason you couldn't trap this black queen on the previous move is because the queen can actually capture this pawn. This is the only escape route, so you might as well bring your knight forward first to defend this square. But meanwhile, Hans, he didn't pluck up the courage to play that move. That would have been extremely risky. Instead, he brings his bishop to the side of the board, attacking the white rook. And the white rook can move, of course. It ideally wants to keep this pawn under protection. But, OK, Hans at least trying to disrupt white's piece coordination. The threat is this rook, of course, and still Magnus has to calculate what happens on the next turn if black does go and grab this loose pawn in the corner. It's starting to heat up, definitely. And it feels good for white just because white occupies the center. White's pieces are more centralized, but still a bit of hard work to do for Magnus to prove that that actually is meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, here's the kind of candidate moves that you would look at. It's like step forward with the rook. That would be something that maybe is a little bit of a no-brainer, just on the basis that you can use the analysis that we worked out from the move before. Another one move would be like actually maybe stepping forward with the knight to attack the bishop. And just saying, hey, let's you've weakened your king a little bit. Let's start looking at some pieces. So those are the kind of main moves that I would be looking at.
Yeah, and we could see a really cool pawn structure here if black actually captures this knight. So white will have doubled pawns, but just look how strong these four are right now. We talk about controlling center. These four pawns together, just super powerful. So that could have happened, but Magnus, actually it might still happen. Yeah. Magnus instead flicking in a different move, what we call an intermezzo or Zwischenzug, like an in-between move. Before dealing with a threat against his rook, he counters against the black queen, so a counter threat. And attacking the queen, of course, and most importantly, defending this pawn now in the corner. The black queen has to retreat.
Yeah, I'm trying to make a point of it. I'm not using an engine until I really, really need it. And so I'm trying to make a point of like CCT, checks, captures, threats. And yeah, I forgot about this one.
Yeah.
Tour.
CCT.
Champions Chess Tour. Oh my God.
Yeah.
How did that never, ever occur to me? Did it ever occur to you? CCT, checks, captures, threats, Champions Chess Tour.
That's literally Chess Player 101, the first thing you learn, the first thing you have to remind yourself every move on every game, CCT.
It's a match made in heaven.
Oh.
I know.
Champions Chess Tour. Never have to remember anything again. Just Champions Chess Tour. Checks, captures, threats.
Exactly. Gosh.
This is mind-blowing, isn't it?
What a moment, you guys. Oh.
Yeah, it really feels like that eureka moment there. You just told me. I was like, oh my goodness me. Never ever occurred to me. And Hans stepping back with his queen. Very unfortunate move, but okay, it had to be done.
Yeah, going back the whole way, ooh, to me it looks a bit weird. It just looks like a loss of time. Black's queen, of course, came from this square, what was it, 4 or 5 moves ago. It came out, and then it had to go back. To me, I would have maybe stepped to a different diagonal just to provoke maybe white to push some pawns, but okay, Hans just playing the safe option, and at least the black queen won't get hit anymore. White won't gain any more time against her.
And Magnus has played quite fast so far. The other matches are, of course, going on as well. And I did see the bar actually all the way over to Liam Le's side in his first game today against David Navarra. And now all of these matches will contain 4 rapid games. And when they finish a game, they have 15 minutes, no matter what happens in the other matches. 15 minutes, and then they start the next game. So we're going to have chess going on all the time today. It's going to be super fun.
Yeah. And whilst Magnus is pondering, finally I can share with you the selfies. So Abhishek says, my budgie menu isn't very friendly with me. Can a game of chess help improve the relationship? And there he is. Very cool yellow room. And there's a little budgie there.
What's a budgie?
A budgie is a bird. It's a budgerigar. It's a small little bird. Very. I used to have one as a pet. Long time ago.
Really?
Yeah, but it died, obviously.
Oh, no.
And that was my first and last time. His name was Pedro. And Haig says, me and Magnus.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a good way to spend the day, Haig.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
And keep those selfies, keep those questions and those comments coming. And you can do that by tweeting us using the hashtag #ChessChamps. We will try and feature them on the show.
Did you have any pets when you were a kid, David?
No, unfortunately not. My mother was afraid of all animals, so maybe one day.
Maybe one day. What would you have if you?
I always envisaged myself with a tiny little cute dog.
Oh, like a Chihuahua?
Yeah, he could be my wingman when I'm out on the streets.
Yeah, that's true.
I wanted a tortoise at some point in my life.
yeah.
I even had the name picked out, Lola. Lola the tortoise. It's like amazing.
But I heard the tortoise, they will outlive their
Yeah,
humans.
this I didn't think it through. It was only until my husband said, hey, you are prepared to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, maybe that's a bit of a commitment. So I said no.
Okay, and actually quite a big moment in the game. So Magnus got his rook out of the eye line of the black dark squared bishop. That rook was under fire, and now also lining itself up with the black queen. If you look on the central file and the D file, really good strategy. It just makes the opponent feel uncomfortable if their queen is being stared at by a rook, even if there's some stuff in the way at the moment. When the position opens, the tactics will work now in white's favor, and black can actually grab a pawn, but I don't think he should. Hans, okay, he doesn't grab any of the white pawns in the center, because that would have allowed white's knight to jump forward, and that would have been really scary for black. So Hans now, with these pawn pushes, especially his last pawn push, he has limited the action, the activity of the white knight. So I think that last move was very, very important. And that was nice from the teenager, just controlling the position. He's still struggling, purely because he's lacking space and white's central pawns are so strong, but at least he's not losing immediately. He's not facing any immediate kind of setbacks. I think sometimes in chess, even if you've got a worse position, even if you've got a disadvantage, you need to take the time out just to stabilize and survive for a few moves, because this is the type of advantage for Magnus which may or may not disappear over the next 3 or 4 moves. It's nothing immediate. It's nothing material. And look at this, Magnus already starting to retreat with his knight.
Yeah. I think he's doing it for a concrete reason, right? Because he wants to control the G4 square, just in case Hans wanted to exchange the king's pawn in the center.
Okay, so we can show this, and I'm surprised, I must admit, it wasn't even on my radar. But as you mentioned, if Magnus had just pushed pawns, this is a very Magnus type of move, gaining space, getting ready for the endgame to push pawns further up the board. Then one idea there you mentioned, Jovanka, is to actually start initiating those trades, taking pawns, and then starting to bring the bishop across, hitting the white queen, hitting the rook behind it, and suddenly some quick moves. The white knight dropped back, covering that key square, and Hans decided now is the moment. And to me, it feels like the wrong moment, but possibly he just couldn't wait any longer. He did initiate some trades, and it's all about these pawns now. There's a threat of bishop takes pawn, hitting the white queen and the rook behind it, using the black bishop. But the question is, can white advance? Can white step forward with this guy or this guy? Hans thinks no.
That is the acid test, right? I mean, can we try it out on the board?
Yeah, I think the key move here is whether this pawn push works. Just trying to, remember, break through using the rook on the same line as the black queen. But after pawn takes pawn, maybe there's an issue for white, because ideally you want to capture towards the center. You don't want to capture away. You want to capture this way, but unfortunately, the bishop is hanging. So some calculation to be done here. It's still really complicated. And,
yeah, he goes for it anyhow, because there are a lot of captures in the position, actually. Yeah, I mean, for instance, okay, so pawn takes, now you can...
And we have this position that we just showed on the board. So, for example, now after rook takes bishop, it looks like a free bishop, but after white recaptures the black bishop, there is actually a double threat, hitting the black queen, and next move, maybe just going to capture this pawn with a check. And I think this is quite likely to happen. Black's queen now can just dodge out the way. I'm not sure which square is best, but after a pawn trade now, it's still very, very tense. White's pieces are actually not as active as they were previously. Black does, okay, this is about to happen. Black does have a nice bishop, a nice queen, nice rook, controlling lots of squares, but white can start pushing forward again, pushing this guy, pushing this pawn next, and white's moves all come with threats. So, okay, this one, it feels like black should be fine somehow, but still, it feels like Magnus in the driving seat. Just because he can start pushing. And also, white's king is safer than black's. If you imagine, for example, white getting just one more move, pushing forward in the center, hitting the black knight, then suddenly white's bishop is going to be far stronger than this block of wood on the side of the board.
And it's definitely heating up in all of the other quarterfinal matches as well. Look at the bar, Liam Le, looking good for him against David Navarro in game 1. The bar just went all the way over to Duda's side in his game against David Anton. And world number 3, Ding. The bar is liking it for him against Jordan van Fore's game 1. Bunch of moves.
A bunch of moves, and very similar to what we predicted, but Magnus actually went for this line without trading a set of pawns. So Magnus, he's definitely been influenced by Daniel Dubov, studying with him, because earlier he tried to give up a couple of pawns. It wasn't accepted by Niemann. He gave up a couple of pawns earlier. A few moves later, it wasn't taken by Hans Niemann, and finally, black is a pawn up. But look at this. The kickback has started again. Black's knight under threat.
I get what he's trying to do. So Magnus is playing purely in a positional way. He's just saying, look at black's bishop, locked out of the game. I'm going to be a piece up.
Yeah, I mentioned it's basically a block of wood, this bishop. And the black bishop, the only way to break out of this cage is to sacrifice itself at some point. Hans here, he would love to trade off all the pieces just to get out his bishop from behind white's strong pawn chain on the dark squares here, but it's just not possible. And Magnus, if he's clever, will find a way of just keeping this bishop caged, while, as Jovanka mentions, just pretending he's a piece up. Black's actually the pawn up in this position. He goes for a trade. Slightly surprising. Maybe that black knight too strong, but either way, the white knight better than the black bishop.
How impressed are you now with the way Hans has defended this? It didn't look too good for a while there.
Yeah.
Well, despite what the computer is saying, I wouldn't say it looks too good for him now. I mean, Hans has to tread very accurately because, as David mentioned, the bishop, not great piece, is just jammed in by white's pawns. So black could be, in effect, a piece down if that bishop doesn't get motoring, doesn't fire way out. All Magnus needs to do is start playing in the center, use his extra knight, and it will be such a dreadful position for Hans. So he's not out of the woods yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of impressed by both players. Magnus, because he's trying to go for this long-term kind of domination, just controlling the black bishop. But Hans, he did, okay, wow, talking of bad pieces, he's decided that that black bishop was so bad, he's sacrificed it. He's given it up for just 2 pawns, and suddenly the white king is a bit open, but Magnus frowning, he's surprised. That move, so brave. I mean, you're a piece down now, and white's knight keeps the king relatively safe. So Hans upping the stakes, and I don't think that was necessary. I think he was just maybe, I mean, he's a confident player, Hans. Maybe he's overestimating his chances here, or maybe he just thought there was nothing better. But this was just a last-ditch, kind of last resort type of move, and he played it really relatively quickly. Jovanka, I mean, I'm a materialist. I prefer having the white knight here over the black pawns. What do you think?
Well, actually, having sat next to you all this time, I'm like, hang on a second. White has the perfect defender. A knight is a king's best friend. So I don't think white is in any danger whatsoever. So I agree, a bit too eager. Maybe Hans was panicking a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, his bishop was not the best piece in the world, as we were saying, but I don't think that was the right moment to sacrifice. There are actually no current threats on the board. No matter what black does next, white's rooks can block. I mean, the white rook next to the king, you can even centralize that, double the white rooks on the d-file, maybe even go for the black king, which lacks defenders. And yeah, a piece for 2 pawns. If all the queen's rooks disappear, it's just a simple win for white with the extra knight. So yeah, Hans definitely, he's playing against maybe Magnus's clock, Magnus's nerves. He just wants to find that kind of chaotic position that we were talking about before the show. Maybe it was just his match strategy beforehand, just not allow any slow, quiet kind of maneuvering end games. It's all about chaos, and maybe it's just a practical decision here.
Yeah, could also be part of the Magnus effect. You're like, well, you know, I don't want to suffer. He's probably going to torture me for a long time. So let's just do it. Let's take that risk. And unfortunately, this can backfire because, as you'll probably find out, Magnus is a great defender.
Yeah, that's the thing. Many players think, oh, Magnus is going to beat me anyway, might as well go down in flames. But sometimes that speeds up their own defeat. And OK, meanwhile, white's knight has centralized itself, offering a trade of rooks. As we mentioned, trades long-term should help white with the material advantage now. But a knight versus 2 pawns, it's not completely over. So still some fight left. And the evaluation bar still thinking black has some chances. It's not all one-way traffic.
Yeah. One move I don't think that black should be playing is trading rooks. If you trade rooks, then it actually helps white because the queen is quite nicely placed on next to her king, because black's king is unsafe as well.
Problem is, what else? Where do you run away from if you don't want to trade off this set of rooks? And
Okay,
he does that.
He does take it.
The black rook, in order to avoid this trade, would have had to kind of flee to one of the sides of the board, and then this white rook on the f-file would have been really scary, pointing towards the black king. So
true.
Maybe just, yeah, I agree. You don't want to swap rooks, but maybe there was just no other choice. Process of elimination.
So what do you think will be the result of this game? I mean, what looks the most likely right now?
To me, Magnus winning.
Okay.
Yeah, agreed. I think maybe if the players were both under 1 minute or so, then Hans would have decent chances because the white king is maybe slightly more open than its counterpart. But Magnus having 4 minutes, that feels like enough to convert this. And we've seen it before, actually, last month in the Air Things Masters and in the prelims between these two players. As soon as Magnus got a material advantage, he converted it very smoothly. In the prelims, it was actually similar. It was kind of a slower start, and then it just blew open the center, kind of burst into life the game. But then as soon as it calmed down again, Magnus won very, very smoothly. And there we go, the rook recaptured. And look at the white knight. It's such a strong piece. It stops the black rook from coming down to the bottom board to the first row and attacking the white queen and king.
And why did it take with the queen and not the king?
That's a good question. I think maybe the king would have been okay too, but maybe I think Magnus had foreseen that the black rook was coming down to the second rank anyway, and the white queen would have come under fire, so it's just a timing thing. The rook was coming here anyway, why not just get the white queen out of the way first, instead of wasting a move and then having to move her again anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now, this black rook at least trying to cause some damage, attacking a couple of pawns, and Magnus just bringing his queen up. Okay, interesting. He's actually gambiting his pawn in the corner here. We've talked about that white a2 pawn, Alice the a pawn, a couple of times already this game. And earlier, Hans didn't take that pawn. Can he get away with capturing it now? That's the big question.
And wouldn't it look quite nice for those two black pawns on that side then, if it's open?
It'd be a dream if
it
he
would
can
be a
take it.
dream, but he also needs white to trade off queens as well.
Okay.
Because whilst the queens are on the board, both kings are unsafe, there's a lot of danger. So, I mean, the principal thing that Hans is considering right now, if he captures that pawn, he concedes the c line. And maybe white will put a rook there and start asking some questions.
Yeah, some real, problems here, possibly for Hans, if he gets greedy and captures this pawn. It's the first move on my radar. It's the first thing Hans will be calculating as well. If you can take a pawn, now suddenly you have 3 black pawns in return for the white knight. Endgames might even be in your favour. The white knight will be stretched. But as Jovanka mentions, there's a couple of moves here that are very tempting for white. The rook can... OK, he doesn't go for it, understandably. The rook can slide across, attacking the black queen.
The knight can move.
Yeah. Also, if you notice, these two pieces are on the same diagonal. White has a big threat of checking in the centre of the board and hitting both of those two pieces at the same time. And as Jovanka mentions, the white knight can move, maybe to block in the black queen, hem it in. The white pawn can step forward, maybe going for a direct checkmate. too much to calculate there, too many scary moves. I think on this occasion, greed was not good. So Hans, his sense of danger was kind of alert there. So he just moved his king forward off that diagonal that I mentioned. And now the pawn stepping forward, which looks really scary, trying to support a queen check, would simply be met by queen takes pawn on this square. And yeah, or maybe even a queen check here. It's a lot of checks for both sides to work out right now.
So, I mean, Hans has these pawns, and he has a rook on that dream second line. So what is the star player here for Magnus? Is it simply that knight he has, or why is the bar liking it more for Magnus?
Yeah.
It likes the knight.
Yeah.
It likes the knights over the two pawns that Black has. I mean, that's the basic issue at the minute. And also, you know, White's rook is quite good. White's queen is also quite good. But it's mainly the knight.
Okay.
And if you compare the two pawns, at the moment, they don't really do too much. The two pawns Black has in return for the knight are these two. I guess one of them, this one, guards the Black king, so that's a decent pawn. But this pawn, while the heavy pieces are still on the board, the queens and the rooks, it's not really going to start advancing anytime soon. It will just be captured. So it's better to have a piece in general which is so flexible, which is a good defender covering this first rank, but also maybe an attacker later on going towards the Black king. And yeah. I mentioned the endgame is favouring White, but there are some endgames, especially if this pawn in the corner drops, where the knight is not as good as the pawns. And wow, Magnus is going for it now. He's bringing his knight. He's threatening a deadly check, hitting the Black king and queen at the same time. But the knight is no longer a defender. So this is a nasty check. And how is White going to run out of this? You have to step up the board. There we go. Magnus running away from the check. And is he going to continue running? For example, if the rook checks the White king, do you have to step up the board again?
Ooh.
And wow, the king, the only way to find safety is to run behind your own pieces. And the problem is the Black rook cannot really step up to create this pin now because there's a knight fork, remember, check and winning the Black queen. And okay, this one's really heating up. The queen has come down to check the White king. And now I think Magnus is going to do the same. He's going to hide somewhere on the edge of the board. Is he going to step here or here? Oof, really big decision.
It is a big decision because there are a lot of checks on the board. So if you step forward with your king on a light square, then the queen can come and check diagonally.
Yeah.
And the game continues, right?
Yeah, and if you go the other way, Jovanka,
if you go up the board, then the rook will come and give check. And if the king goes to the light square again, it's a diagonal check. And this time it's even worse. You're going to get probably mated there.
Yeah, this king is definitely going to get checkmated. So I think his only idea, okay, was to block with the knight. I think maybe he could have stepped up the board and then blocked with the knight in this direction. Now stepped back, but okay, the move's coming really fast now. Big threat on the board. The White knight actually stepped back as a defender, and now Hans is trying to line up on the first rank, a nasty check behind the king and behind the queen. Magnus has to be really careful now. This is a deadly threat. He has to use his queen to cover this square, I feel. Maybe this square or this square. You've got to be you've got to be careful.
You've got to be very careful because if the queen loses connection with her rook, then there will be moves like rook takes...
and then a check.
Yeah. And he has ticked under the minute, Magnus Carlsen. Now, you did say a few minutes ago, David, then that would be chances for Hans Niemann.
Yeah, definitely chances. He's done a great job of keeping up the pace. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but maybe Magnus needs to find this move, dropping the queen back. Maybe we can go back to the players and see what Stockfish says, the top computer suggestions here, because Magnus, under 30 seconds, he's got a narrow path to survival. And, okay, White does have a few moves to survive. The knight... jumping forward to the G3 square is the best move. That's really difficult, though.
That is difficult.
Moving the White knight.
Dropping the queen back, also good. Anything else, it's going to spoil the win. It's going to be a draw.
OK, so we see a third move there from Stockfish, but Magnus doesn't play any of the top three suggestions. Will we see a turnaround now? Black's back in the game. Black can give a check with his rook. Oh, suddenly the White king is really not safe.
And Hans still more than 4 minutes on the clock. He finds a move as well.
Finds the best move. And look at this White king walking out into the open. This adventure might not end well for it, though. The Black queen can slide across behind the White knight. Suddenly, from every angle, the White king is getting attacked.
And that's what Hans does. And some really dangerous checks in the air. I mean, is it going to be at least a draw for Hans Niemann?
Feels like, I think at this point, Magnus wants the draw. Magnus would love to see the position repeat itself. and he pushes a pawn. At least now he's opened up a diagonal towards the black king, so white's queen can step forward with some checks maybe. So now Hans, I think you're right, Jovanka, if he wants, he can maybe force a draw by stepping with the black queen to the f2 square, and white's king is not actually going to be able to escape the checks. There's going to be a repetition of the position, but maybe Hans wants more.
Wow.
Maybe he wants to go for the win.
2 games have already finished with the winner, Liam Le winning the first game against David Navarra and Ding Liren winning the first game against Jordan van Forest. These players have 15 minutes and then they start game number 2. But Liam Le and Ding Liren in the lead in their quarterfinals now. And the question, will Magnus Carlsen be in the lead after this, or even Hans Niemann now?
Yeah, I mean, all 3 results are possible despite the computer saying 0.0. The momentum is all in black's favour. He's turned it around. White has completely lost control. White's king is so open as well, but white still has this extra knight. So if he can survive the onslaught, okay, this is the second time we've seen this position. We saw a check, another check. Is Magnus really going to play for the win? He's considering it, but only 35 seconds. In order to play for the win, you either have to go up the board with your king, which looks terrifying, or you go back and you run to the left side of the board. But okay, is he really going to go for it? No, he doesn't. The players bail out with a draw.
Wow. What a, well, I'm going to say what a game by Hans Niemann. That's quite impressive, the way he was able to defend and start attacking.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he did a speculative knight sacrifice to open up the king position of Magnus's. And what's really impressive is that he managed to maintain the momentum and keep the World Championship under pressure. And at the end, it was the world champion who was visibly struggling there. And he was the one who had to beg for the draw.
And in time trouble as well, but they are tied now, Hans Niemann and Magnus Carlsen, after the first game. David, many chances for Magnus in this game. What happened?
Yeah, many chances for Magnus, but Hans, he fought off all of the threats, and actually that bishop sacrifice that we weren't so sure about, it really paid off. He opened up the white king effectively, and it was just this moment maybe that Magnus finally did lose control. We were praising this white knight and how it's covering lots of important squares, especially this magical c1 square. It stops the black rook given check, but Magnus now stepping forward with his knight. Maybe he should have moved his rook or pawn instead, but stepping forward with his knight did allow black to go on the counter-attack, and Hans seized that opportunity with both hands. He gave a check, he gave another check with the black queen, and when the white knight dropped back, he found a way to continue the threats. He brought his rook across. We talked about CCT, it's checks, captures and threats, and that continued. We joined at this position a bit earlier as well with nasty checks to the white king, and that forced Magnus later to repeat the position. There was just no other way to survive. A really interesting fighting game.
In 14 minutes, game 2 between Hans Niemann and Magnus Carlsen in their quarterfinal match. And Hans Niemann with the white pieces. He must have gained some self-confidence after getting the world champion into some time trouble. But now, you guys, we're super excited to show you the next play, Magnus Charity Challenge. And this time, it's with a football superstar. This was recorded a few days ago, so enjoy. He's the winger and attacking midfielder for the American national team and for Chelsea in the Premier League. Most recently, scoring 2 goals when Chelsea advanced to the quarterfinals in the Champions League. And now joining us to play in the Charity Challenge, Christian Pulisic. Welcome to our chess show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. And I hear rumors you are quite a chess fan.
I am quite a chess fan. Picked it up. I mean, I learned when I was very young. My grandfather taught me how to play, and I just picked it up again recently. And yeah, I just really enjoy the game.
And Christian, how did you get back into chess now? Do you play a lot online, for example?
Yeah, I play a lot online. Some of my friends from home, we have with challenges. Some of my teammates, we like to play. So yeah, I play mostly online.
And what is it that fascinates you about the game of chess?
For me, it's just like the constant problem solving, and I really enjoy that every game, something can be a bit different. There's always a new position, there's always different moves that you need to find, and I love games that involve a lot of skill, and I feel like you can't just get lucky in chess all the time. The better player is normally going to win.
And it's always so interesting when we talk to athletes that play chess as well. I always wonder, do you play chess just as a hobby, or is it actually something you use to actually train the brain and stay focused on the pitch as well?
So I think a bit of both. It's definitely a hobby, but I really think there are benefits to the game. I think it can really help you to stay sharp in your head, and you have to be, quick, think very quickly, and I think that can probably help in different aspects.
Definitely.
Yeah, and Christian, I'm a huge football fan myself, I've got to say. And is chess something you see in locker rooms? Have you played with other football players? And if you have, who's the best player?
Yeah, I don't know about, right before games maybe, but I think it's something that you will see occasionally. I think a lot of players do enjoy playing. For example, I play against N'Golo Kante on my team. We have a big rivalry in our chess matches, so we love to play some games against each other.
Who usually wins?
I think if you ask him, he'll give you a different answer. But I like to say I'm a little bit better.
Absolutely. And now you're going to play in the charity challenge. What's going to be your ambition now playing against Magnus at 10 years old?
Listen, I'm just excited to have some fun and hopefully win some money for a good cause. And I think. I don't know how good he was at age 10, but I know how good he is now. So I'm excited for the challenge.
Yeah, well, David, you can let us know, how good was Magnus Carlsen at 10 years old already?
Yeah, Christian, I'm actually the exact same age as Magnus, and we were already playing each other at age 10 on the international circuit. He was already aiming for those titles, beating adults. So yeah, be careful. He's a tricky customer.
And of course, Christian, Puma is donating $500 per move that you're able to last against Magnus, donated to UNICEF. How much of an extra motivation is that for you?
Yeah, that gives great motivation. I'm going to give it my absolute best shot. Hopefully, last year as long as I can. Really for a good cause. So I'm excited.
Fantastic. This will be super exciting to follow. So Christian will now play Magnus Carlsen at 10 years old in our Play Magnus charity challenge. He's going to have 2 minutes on the clock. The aim is to last as many moves as possible before being checkmated on the board, or losing on the time, or of course winning. But as David mentioned, Magnus at 10 years old, he was super tricky. And the charity twist here is that Puma will donate $500 per move that Christian is able to last. So Christian, are you ready now for the challenge?
I'm ready, I think so.
Awesome. All right, well, good luck and get ready and make your first move when you're ready. Here we go.
Game on. Okay, D4.
Okay, he's moving fast.
Yeah, speed is good though. Okay.
Oh.
Trade the pawns in the center. That's good. This is still actually a well-known position. Magnus is going to occupy the center with some pawns. And the knight in the center is hit. Christian saw the threat. Okay, that's a check. Early check against white's king. Easily blocked though. Christian's spotting everything so far.
Castle my king.
An equal position. Black occupies the center, but white is the first to castle. White has good pieces. Oh, look at the focus.
Yeah.
And speed is good.
This could be a lot of moves, and still 1 minute and 30 seconds left on the clock for Christian Pulisic.
Yeah, really professional game so far. Okay, even more professional now. Look at this, bringing out his bishop, putting pressure on black center from afar, developing his pieces. So logical right now.
Looks professional.
Wow, he's stopping every single threat that Magnus is creating. Black's pushing pawns, white's blocking them.
All right, let's see here.
Christian's got a great position, I've got to say. And black's queen coming out. He maybe just needs to up the speed a little bit.
Yeah.
Magnus playing super fast as expected. Okay, I like it. Solid move. Stopping black from doing anything, and Magnus is running out of ideas, retreating pieces, retreating a bishop.
Could Christian win this in only 1 minute left?
For 1 minute, it's going to be difficult, but it's an equal position. Chances are level. If he had 5 minutes, I would bank on Christian here, to be honest.
Take.
Okay, good. Nice move.
Impressive stuff. 55 seconds left on the clock here.
I think this is one of the best games we've seen from anyone challenging Play Magnus.
Wow.
Magnus, age 10. It's better than I did against Magnus, I've got to admit. But it's just the time, 48 seconds, and it's still a middle game. He needs to speed up, get the queens off maybe, trade some pieces, go on an attack against the black king. Okay, he's going to open things Is he going to open things? Christian needs to speed up now.
Yep. 35 seconds left on the clock, but he's playing such a good game.
Perfect game so far. Black's threatening a pawn on the edge of the board. Okay, he's going to move his knight. This is a great decision, but he's spending too long on this move.
Yep.
26 seconds now. Okay.
Make a quick move, Christian.
Move those knights, move those pawns. Okay, he's going to push a pawn in the center. That's a great move.
Very low on the clock here. Need to play a bit faster. Okay, I don't want to hang my queen.
Okay, he needs to move that queen out of the way. Ooh, he's sacrificing a knight here. Black can capture that knight.
Okay, it is the clock, no doubt. 10 seconds left. Get some more moves in there.
Yeah, he's just played a great move though. He's attacking the black queen.
Okay, he wants to do that.
Trading things off. Okay, he's got a great position still, but only 5 seconds for Christian. Capture that pawn in the center. Go on, move. 2 seconds, 1 second.
And the clock's running out.
Out of time.
Oh, wow. And if you press continue, Christian, we're going to see how many moves this was. 25 moves. The clock was definitely an issue there, but what a game, Christian. What was that like?
Yeah, that was fun. It was a little bit. I was not really used to the interface. It was a bit different, but yeah, I thought I had a chance for a while. I wasn't completely losing, but yeah, I was very low on the time, so I needed to play faster.
Well, Grandmaster David Howell here. You were super impressed during this game, David.
Yeah, Christian, I guess it was just the clock in the end because you played a great game. I was saying to Kaja, I've challenged the app myself, and I think you played a bit better than me in the middle game. So, yeah, I mean, keep playing, keep testing yourself against Magnus. I think you would have had him if you had a few more minutes there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amazing game, and yeah, what a charity challenge that was. And actually, Christian, not only are you participating in the charity challenge, you're also going to let us auction out a pair of your Puma football shoes. So thank you so much for that as well, and you're going to sign them as well, right?
Yes, I'll make sure to sign them, and I'll be giving those. So I'm really excited about that. Now,
I do hear a rumor from Puma that there is actually a chess piece on your football shoes. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I do have a bishop on the back of my chess boots. Just something that I don't know. I think is really cool, and I just like having it on my boot when I play.
Wow. What is the reason behind the bishop?
I don't think there's a specific reason. I think it's my favorite chess piece. I don't know why. The look of it, or just the way it moves. I don't know why. I just like the bishop.
Because when I heard it, I envisioned, the fianchetto bishop just coming across the board the way you're doing from your wing position when you're just shooting in across to the goal and scoring your beautiful goals. I thought maybe that was the reason.
Yeah, you know what? I think maybe you're right. You could see in this game, I fianchetto my bishop, and then maybe that has some kind of a connection there. So.
Fantastic. Now, Christian, thank you so much for auctioning out your shoes and for participating in the challenge. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you. How cool is that Chelsea superstar, Christian Pulisic? He has a bishop on his football shoes.
I didn't expect that twist.
It's incredible.
Yeah, incredible. And now I'm really curious because they're right in front of us here. And I'm like, whoa, where is this bishop? I want to see.
So these are just a copy of the kind of football shoe that he's wearing, but he has specially designed football shoes, and on them he has a bishop and also the American flag, and he has signed these boots. And he's going to let us auction them out to you guys in the fundraiser for UNICEF. So cctauction.com, that's where you head to get your hands on these very special Christian Pulisic chess football boots. The current bid is $325. I mean, it's so cool. Who would imagine?
Yeah. They call him Captain America, his teammates, the fans, and you could own Captain America's football boots. That's one of the coolest things. And I'm not a Chelsea fan, but I'm becoming a bit of a fan of him now.
So, definitely.
Yeah, those chess skills.
And $325 at the minute, that's a bargain.
I know.
And with every single money going to UNICEF, it's well worth. Yeah, I think I think I might bid. If it's gonna be 325, that's
Definitely. And 2 hours left to make your bid on these chess football boots signed by Christian Pulisic himself. And of course, this charity cup is all about making donations to UNICEF, who is inside Ukraine helping the people who are caught up in the war and also the refugees. 1.5 million children have become refugees because of the war already. So we have so far been able to raise more than $70,000. Actually, with this Play Magnus charity challenge, $12,500 more from Puma will be added to the donation bar. That means we're over $80,000, you guys. That's great, but we don't want to stop there. So please keep on donating to UNICEF. All right, we're getting close to game 2 for Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann. Niemann will have the white pieces in this one. I do think we have time for a quick look at the results so far in the quarterfinals. We know the first game between these two ended with a draw. Liam, he won the first game against David Navarra and is up by 1 point. Look at that, Jan-Krzysztof Duda. Eventually, he was able to win the first game against David Anton. Dingley Ren, a great win in his first game against Jordan van Forest. And the only game ending up with a draw, Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann, the world champion, will have the black pieces in the next game, starting in a few seconds. And already Liam Le and David Navarra and Dingley Ren and Jordan van Forest have started their games twos. And of course, David, Hans Niemann with the white pieces. Are we expecting the Joe Bava London?
I think he should go for it simply.
Yeah.
Clearly, Hans, with this chessable course, he's been studying this opening, the Jabava London system. He's actually won with it already this tournament. Okay, he's played 1d4. Magnus may be scared of the Jabava London system, pushing a pawn. And Hans smiling.
Yes.
Magnus denying Hans the chance to play the London. Oh, wow. You know that he would have done it now. He's giving it away, and Magnus just tucks into his food. Hans frustrated in his attempts to play his chessable course open.
Well, but that is sort of a sign of some respect from Magnus Carlsen as well. He knows Hans Niemann has made a chessable course, and I think it's coming out. It's coming out tomorrow. This course, so Magnus haven't been able to watch it yet.
Oh, and the chessable course, we should mention, it would have arisen if Black had. Wow, Magnus there playing the Dutch defence. But if Black had brought his knight out on the first move, which Magnus does maybe 90% of the time against 1d4, then we would have seen the Jabava London system. White's knight on the queen side jumping out, the white bishop, the white dark square bishop jumping out as well. But yeah, maybe Magnus, he hadn't had time to study that opening, and maybe he was just too afraid of the opening. And yeah, Hans, of course, once the course is released tomorrow, everyone's going to know what his ideas are. So that would have been the perfect opportunity. Meanwhile, we've transposed into the Dutch defence, as mentioned, and a very rare customer at top level. But either way, the Stonewall Dutch, super solid. We saw this actually earlier in the tournament, the Stonewall Dutch by Richard Rapport. And that one a bit shaky. Black has no control over the dark squares in the centre now. But as we mentioned in the last game between these two, Black is adopting that strategy of everything on light squares in the middle of the board, just to survive the opening.
This is an old favourite of Magnus's. And just going back to opening choices, I do have an interesting question from JMR18, who asks, what opening for Hans' next game with white is the most promising against Magnus? And this is the bit I want to get to you. Is there a kryptonite? Have you noticed anything in Magnus's repertoire with the black pieces where you think he's a little bit vulnerable?
It's hard. He's the world champion for a reason. Off the top of my head, I would say it is maybe things like the Jabava London system or something that's maybe not mainstream. Of course, with his world championship matches in the last few years, Magnus has studied 1e4 extensively. He's worked out what to do in the martial defence. As Black, he's working out what to do in, for example, the Nimzo Indian, the Queen's Gambit declined. He's worked out his repertoires there. But if you can maybe play sidelines against him, against Magnus, at least you can get a game. You get a very playable position, and that's what the Jabava London system would have done. So Magnus, knowing that maybe, not, I wouldn't say his kryptonite, but maybe knowing that it would have been Hans's type of position more than his, he's just steered the game in a different direction. And that's sensible from the world champion. I think Hans has done everything he can in this opening to get just a solid position and get a playable position, but Magnus doing the same. And that's why these two players are so good. They're not sitting targets. At the top level, you can't just play the same opening every single round. You have to mix things up. And that's what they're doing. And Hans still smiling, maybe just still annoyed that he didn't get that one opportunity, maybe opportunity of a lifetime to play his own favourite opening.
And I just noticed his T-shirt as well. I think that was the Joker on his T-shirt. I wonder if that is a sign. He's going to play some tricks today.
Well, it's a good sign to be relaxed. And you spot those opportunities and you're a little bit more creative if you're relaxed and not feeling the strain. And I'm really curious about this type of position because my favourite thing to do here with the white pieces is swap off the dark squared bishops. And I just do that just to lessen Black's control over the big central square that's an outpost on e5. And you really want to go there with a knight. But first, I always try and trade off.
OK, so there's two ways to try and trade off these bishops. For example, you can step forward in this one.
That's the way I do it. I'm like right to the point.
Swap these guys off. The other way we should mention is to step forward with a pawn and then try and trade the bishops from this angle.
Much more popular to do that.
Very popular avenue. And for example, let's just say the bishops come off the board. OK, Hans actually adopting a different strategy, but if the bishops had come off the board, White has full access now to this central square. It is an outpost. If the White Knight jumps in, it is supported by a pawn, and this is quite promising. But Black will try and fight against this by just trading as many pieces as possible. And Hans has said no trades. Black is slightly cramped. And in the game, instead of swapping these bishops now by bringing it out, he kicked back Black's bishop instead. And once the bishop retreated, stepped forward with his queen. And as I mentioned, Black is slightly cramped because these pieces still asleep, still at home. This bishop's slightly less active than it was. However, White has committed the pawn structure, and now there's no pressure on Black's structure here. These pawns are relatively flexible now, and maybe kind of Magnus's dream long-term is going to be to break forward in the centre and trade things off, open things up. White has committed, gained space on the queen side, so maybe Black will try and play on the other flank, on the other side of the board. This one is shaping up just like the last game. With all pieces on the board, it's shaping up to be really tense, and it will explode later in the game.
One thing I have noticed with Hans' openings, and maybe even his style in general, is he tends to break the rules. And here, the rules in this particular pawn formation is to maintain the pressure as much as you can, and the battle will revolve around the middle squares. But here, he's kind of like, no, I'm going to extend as far as I can, which to many people would be like, wait, that's too committal. Don't do it so early. And here he immediately tries to go forward with his queenside pawns. And Magnus is like, no. So now we're going to see a kind of battle between unconventional chess, and Magnus is going to try to punish him via the normal means, which will probably be to do with undermining White's far advanced pawn at the right time.
Maybe later you can try and challenge this guy. And very important move, actually, just to explain from Magnus. Normally, you don't want to touch pawns on the side where you're weaker. So, for example, actually, White has a space advantage now on this left side. And you can tell space advantages by the direction with which your pawns are pointing. White's pawns in the center, they're pointing towards this queen side now. So White has the advantage over here. So normally, you don't want to touch pawns, but it's just imperative. You have to stop White gaining even more space. So Magnus has pushed his rook's pawn forward, clamping down. Now this pawn cannot be pushed because it would just be captured and it would actually open up the black rook. So really important move there from Magnus. And after White's knight jump, I do expect the pieces to start coming out. This is the problem child, the problem piece in this opening, blocked in by its own pawns here. So you need to get it out for Black. You need to start bringing this bishop out at some point, maybe towards the king side in this direction, or you can plonk your knight in the center of the board. At least you have firm control over this square as Black. So let's go back to the players. It's shaping up just like the last game, really nicely for a long battle.
Yeah. Ooh. And talking about long battles always have an audience, and I really want to share with you some selfies that we have. Croatian Way says, all the way from Croatia, a big hello to everyone in the studio. Magnus for a win. So there you go. Magnus supporter. And Microwave T says, nice analysis by us. Thank you. And also has a tweet, has a selfie. And Magnus, of course, jumping in with his knight in the center. And JMR18 sends us greetings from Germany, and he's rooting for Ding. So definitely keep those selfies, keep those questions and comments coming, and you can always do that via the hashtag #ChessChamps on Twitter.
Absolutely. I really do wonder who you guys are cheering for. I mean, Hans Niemann, he must be getting a lot of fans in the US right now.
Yeah, I remember actually when the pandemic first struck, I spent a lot of time on Twitch watching the top chess streamers, and he was one of the most popular. Every time I logged on, he'd have thousands of people watching him play bullet games, blitz games against Nakamura. And yeah, he's a very charismatic guy, very confident guy, trash talking his opponents quite a lot. And yeah, he definitely has a big fan base. And anyone who has watched Hans streaming knows that he's one of the quickest thinkers out there as well. He spots 3 or 4 options on every move within seconds. And his decision making, especially over the last year or two, has really improved as well. So, okay, meanwhile, making a quick decision. Magnus trying to put pressure in the center of the board, planting a black knight in the middle, putting his bishop as well, eyeing up some white pawns. Hans just reacting instantly. And also, he's the type of player who's very much been inspired by Hikaru Nakamura. He doesn't want to find the best move every time, Hans. He's very much playing against the opponent's psychology, and he's just playing for consistency. He wants those kind of 70%, 80% type best moves, tucking into his snacks meanwhile. And yeah, he just wants to get moves quickly on the board and to confuse his opponents.
Inspired by Magnus, I wonder, because I think Magnus was looked like a taco bowl or something like that, and this looks like a taco burrito Hans is eating. It's Mexican night in the Charity Cup.
Yeah, it's quite funny actually. Yeah. There aren't too many sports where you're sat there in the middle of play and then you just bring out a snack. I mean, I guess you could argue the old style cricket was like that. You know? But they don't do that anymore, right?
You just spilt some there.
Be careful, Hans.
I mean, I think the position right now isn't quite as messy as the food.
A nice one.
But yeah, it's... yeah, they say fight fire with fire, right? But fighting tacos with tacos, that's maybe his strategy. Meanwhile, yeah, just a quiet bishop move there from Magnus. Another plan that I highlighted a few moves ago, that black bishop is stuck behind its own pawn chain. It just wants to zigzag its way out into the open. And Hans just eating. He's got to make sure he doesn't fall into the same trap that Magnus has done, especially last season on the tour. Where Magnus would often make mistakes or blunders after eating, maybe just losing concentration for a moment or two.
Yeah, because I guess you would have, depending on what you ate, you know, you might have a sugar rush, and then once that spike goes down, maybe you kind of go into this slump. And
both eating now.
Yeah. Chess competition or eating competition? Maybe.
That's hungry.
Yeah. Well, Kevin Winter tells us on Twitter that there are quite a few Premier League footballers that play chess. For example, Liverpool's Trent Arnold, Reece James and Martin Kelly at Crystal Palace, and Ben Chitwell.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Martin Kelly, I actually played.
Yeah, Crystal Palace player, yeah. And I also heard about, Trent Alexander-Arnold, that he likes to play chess as well.
I think he had a chess event with Magnus a couple of years ago, aided by one of England's top juniors, Shreyas Royal. So, yeah, some big names.
And we also know that Manny Pacquiao, although retired, he likes to play chess as well.
He's a great chess player.
Yeah.
You know, I would put him at the category of around about 1900, 2000 at least.
Impressive.
At least. So, very, very strong chess player. And an intriguing fact is that after this boxing match, my apologies, you have to stay awake for a certain amount of hours. And so in order to stay awake, he plays chess.
Interesting, yeah, because of all the knocks you get to your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, cool. All right, well, we did have a move, David. I mean, how would you describe this position right now?
Yeah, I still think, okay, Hans there just reacting, really surprised. I'm surprised as well. I would just describe this position as still relatively standard. Still feels like the tension, the kind of excitement is yet to come. I'm trying to think of a football analogy or a boxing analogy. It's like, I guess, in boxing when the two players are just sizing each other up. They're just kind of tiptoeing around each other, occasionally throwing a punch out there and just seeing that blocked, but nothing too drastic.
No buses parked.
No buses parked. No
but we
big
do have the
knockouts
Fiat
anytime
Keto
soon.
Bishop.
We do have a pink-coated bishop, yeah.
The Pulisic bishop, I'm going to call it from now on. Pulisic bishop.
Yeah, just ready to cut in from the wings later on.
Yeah.
And yeah, black's bishop as well, meanwhile, actually doing the reverse of Pulisic's favourite bishop. It's cutting out to the wings maybe later on the next move. So yeah, it's just very, very tense. It's still all about, it's very blocked. And when it's very blocked, it's all about where you can hop in with your knights. At the moment, black has the best knight of all in the centre of the board. It can get traded, but only at the cost of improving black's pawn structure. So I slightly prefer black, but you can make arguments for both sides. White has a big space advantage with his pawns here, and he's starting to kick back the black knights or kick them to the sides of the board.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll never hear too often these words from me, but I prefer black here actually as well. Even though white has the ideal pawn structure, I love that pawn structure, but I think it's too soon, and I don't think white has enough control. And, you know, the black knight on the edge of the board looks bad for the minute, but has the potential to jump into another outpost on the c4 square. The bishop, the light square bishop, is usually a bad piece. That's actually getting ready to maneuver itself onto a great diagonal. And black has control of the open A line. I don't see what white is doing.
Okay, and maybe lacking a plan. Hans now has retreated his knight, and some tactics might be in the air, some real complications. White's central pawn is actually hanging as well, so we have to delve into the position here. First move that came to my mind, after seeing a retreat, the first thing you should always think is to look forward. If your opponent steps back, you go forward. And here, there is some pressure on black's knight in the middle. It's amply defended, though, by this pawn, But you could think maybe even of sacrificing it. Sometimes in some scenarios you can capture a pawn, for example here, lure out the opponent's king. It's only defended once, that pawn, and then suddenly white's whole central structure drops. This falls with check, and when white blocks, maybe you can start thinking of capturing other pawns as well. This looks very, very tempting. If Magnus wants to play it a bit safer and not kind of gamble everything on a knight jump, on a knight sacrifice, then maybe he can start bringing this bishop out. We mentioned this square earlier. This is very nice, putting some pressure on a pawn and the rook behind it. You could even now bring the bishop to this square because it actually has a lot of targets. If the pawn disappears out the way, you could throw it forward later, then suddenly the bishop's X-ray vision will hit the white queen and hit the rook behind it. This looks tempting to me. Maybe the safest option of all, however, is one that Jovanka mentioned, just trying to get this black knight into the game. So you could even trade off a set of knights. I'm reluctant to do this, but you could maybe trade off a set of knights, and white has to protect this pawn, so maybe you have to take with the queen or the rook, and then at least now the other knight gets replaced by an even stronger knight on an outpost in white's half of the board, supported by a pawn. So yeah, it feels like the momentum is all in Magnus's favour, and creating threats as mentioned, and also spoilt for choice. Lots of options with more time on the clock. I think Magnus is very, very happy. This is the current position. He'll either play knight takes knight or maybe bring his bishop out. And yeah, looking good for black.
Yeah. And on the subject of just watching those two players eat and play chess, it seems like the two go hand in hand, rather like a Seinfeld episode. Milan on Twitter is also with some food, but this time watching Jordan van Forest and cheering for Jordan. And Utopian Wool Gatherer is won their company chess tournament. Go Utopian Wool Gatherer. Well done for that.
Congratulations.
And great trophy there. So big one up. And Shokan is sending us greetings from Kazakhstan and telling us to keep up the good work. And please welcome, look at this very young Magnus supporter. So we love seeing and welcoming the next generation. So love that tweet from Shokan. And remember, if you want to send us your tweets, your questions, your thoughts, then you can all do this via the hashtag #ChessChamps.
Yeah, and it looks like the support is getting to Magnus. The bar is liking it for him right now. Jovanka said it. You did prefer... No, you did prefer... Yeah, you prefer black. Yeah,
I prefer black,
exactly. Yeah.
And, OK, as expected, knight takes knight. I think this was just the most sensible, most kind of easy to calculate option. You only have to look 2 moves ahead. There's this myth about chess players seeing 20 moves into the future, but that's very rarely the case. Normally, we just see 2 or 3 moves in the right direction, and then we stop and we evaluate. And that's what Magnus has just done. He saw you can take off a set of knights, you can bring your knight in, gain a bit of time against white's queen, and yeah, then you start to think again. And that's what Magnus has done. Quick move, bring the knight to a good square, and now have another pause.
And this could be a big round for comebacks. The bar is really liking it for David Navarro with the white pieces against Liam Le. Liam is up by 1 point after the first game. And David Anton, he lost the first game to Jan-Krzysztof Duda, and the bar is liking it for the Spanish chess player in game 2. So maybe he is also about to make a comeback. Ding, he won the first game against Jordan van Forest. In that game, the bar is slightly to the middle, but they just about no, they played for a little while.
Yeah, I think either way, today is going to be a really good day for every player's fighting chess index. I mean, just usually you see it a bit cagey at the start of every day, especially in the knockouts. There's so much at stake. You normally see players maybe take a draw here or there, just play solid here or there, but not these guys. We've got 8 of the most fighting dynamic players in world chess.
Yeah, I love that.
And OK, meanwhile, Magnus just plays a move. It's funny how we talked about light square pawn structure, Jovanka, in the last game. In this game, for black, it's all about light squares. For white, it's all about the dark squares with his pawns. And OK, critical moment now. I just saw the evaluation bar shoot up in Magnus's favour. Maybe that means there's something direct. Maybe he can explode open the centre. You've got to time it correctly, though.
Maybe you can push a pawn. You know, my favourite thing in the world is that that looks quite dynamic, at least.
Yeah, pushing a pawn. You want to push this one.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Me and my arrows. You want to put
in
this...
a new way.
In a normal way. Just push the pawn one square forward.
Yeah.
And this does require some calculation. You have to work out that, for example, after pawn takes, here I think you can take with a knight to hit the white queen and gain time, but you have to be a bit careful because if you took with a bishop, suddenly you would walk into some tactics. You would see knight takes pawn, sacrificing to break open black's pawn structure, but more importantly, looking for those checks, captures and threats. This is a capture and a check, hitting the black king, and next move, just winning the black knight. So you have to calculate these things correctly. Magnus does it. Wow. OK, full chaos on the board. We talked about the pawn structure here. It was perfect. Light squares, light squares, light squares. But now black is trying to break the white structure by undermining this chain. And he's undermining the base of the chain. This is really instructive. If your opponent has a pawn chain, undermine the pawn at the back, because then the rest will easily drop off. And yeah, right now, as mentioned, if white captures, black cannot take with the bishop. That actually loses, but taking with the knight is very strong, because now you hit the white queen and, okay, chaos. We talked about it so many times already today, and it's happening again. White is sacrificing a piece. Hans is not afraid. He sacrificed a piece against Magnus in the last game, giving up his bishop. Now he's given up a knight. And the whole idea is the one I mentioned, but he switched the order of the trick. And now after the pawn recaptures, as it has done, pawn takes, and suddenly black's structure is the one broken. But black has an extra knight. What is happening here? Knight takes pawn will be met by queen takes with a nasty check. And after a queen trade, Hans is going to, because of this check, just pick up this pawn on the left side. And suddenly, after black blocks, for example, white's pawns are super scary. Just like the last game, black has an extra knight, but white has the pawns, and they're super close to promotion. Oh, OK, Hans, I think, spotting a golden opportunity here. And let's go back to the players, because this is about to happen on the board, just as I showed. White now down a piece, but about to obtain these fantastic pawns. Can Magnus stop it? Can Magnus break white's momentum before it completely turns in Hans's favour?
Clever by Hans Niemann.
Yeah. I mean, I think this was his best chance. Things were turning against him. And remember, slow strategic games do not favour him. They only favour Magnus. So he needs to just take risks, sacrifice pieces, throw stuff at Magnus, because that's the only way to beat him. And, OK, a check. Black. I don't know if you have to trade. Maybe you can block this check with a piece.
Yeah, I'm trying to be objective about it, because it was such a moment of excitement that I got a bit of a rush of blood to my head, and I'm just trying to work out, OK, what is the consequences if you do allow everything? So if you do capture and then the bishop does take the pawn and white has these two amazing passed pawns, are they that dangerous? If we like pour some cold water over us and just kind of go, can they advance?
They look pretty dangerous.
They look really dangerous. They look super dangerous.
Yeah,
but
OK, after the queen trade.
And Magnus is taking that cold decision.
Okay, and he puts his rook in the way, so actually trying to give up his rook for white's bishop.
Whoa.
But he's arguing that it's more important to keep that remaining black pawn on the left side. It's actually guarded on the 7th rank by the black rook now, so he would rather give up a rook for a bishop than let that really important pawn drop. And that is instructive. Jovanka, you're laughing.
I'm only laughing because right after making that cool defensive move, he went and got himself a taco and started like dishing some food. I mean, it's so chill. I've never seen the likes of it. Because normally the players are like, okay, right, I must go into 100% focus mode, you know. And Magnus, look at him. Looks like, you're not bothered. Yeah. You don't care.
I guess when you've won the World Championship 5 times, you've earned the right to just take a chill and eat some snacks.
I'm seriously impressed by this kind of just very chill nature that the world champion has. I mean, it's a great place to be, actually.
Yeah. Well,
but I mean, it's a great move that he's just played, actually.
Yeah,
I love it.
Move.
And Hans now thinking for over a minute. So obviously, it's not obvious for him to take that rook?
It's not clear at all. And also, the nature of pins is that actually this rook is not running away yet. So this rook is actually stuck. It's immobilized because of this pin. So white does have another move. You could, for example, just take a timeout. You could just push a pawn. And next move, if you want, you can take it. You can take this rook anytime you want. For example, black might move the king out the way, and then no longer is this rook pinned. It can move on the next turn, and then you take it. But there we go. He didn't actually take this rook. And just to explain why we said it's such a fantastic move, this rook move, it's about defending this pawn. So white's bishop cannot take it now. If the white bishop had actually captured this rook, the downside is that after, for example, black recaptures, suddenly these pawns are stuck. Instead of promoting to new queens like they were, they're easily blockaded. For example, if white moves the bishop, then black can just fully blockade these pawns. And actually, their weaknesses, if anything, they are never, ever going to advance again. So instead, Hans decided, OK, he needs to take a timeout first. He doesn't want to clarify this pin. He doesn't want to kind of show Magnus exactly what he wants to do next. He wants to keep the tension. He brings his bishop out instead. So now he's hoping that Magnus wastes a move with his king, and only then will he take the rook. So he wants to gain a move in the process.
And is it still called a fianchetto bishop when we're in this part of the game?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. This bishop is definitely fianchettoed. This one is kind of no longer fianchettoed, but it could come back.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're on the long diagonal from a safe square like this one, this is definitely a fianchetto.
All right, and we are naming it the Pulisic bishop today. He has a bishop on his football shoes. Christian Pulisic, who played in our Play Magnus charity challenge, and he has signed his very own football boots with this bishop on them, and they're up for auction. The bid currently, it's over $1,000, you guys, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get some very unique chess football boots. So go into cctauction.com to make your bid. All the money goes to UNICEF. And Magnus, he does move his king.
He does move his king out the way. So now Hans's decision has been vindicated. If white goes and captures this rook now, he's actually gained a whole move in the process. So that's why don't rush. That's my tip for everyone at home. Don't rush. If you've got a pin, force your opponent to waste a move getting out of it before committing your pieces. So very instructive. And Hans staying in the game, keeping things balanced now, purely because he's gained a bit of time and because he forced Magnus to spend a move breaking the tension. And yeah, I mean, imagine Christian Pulisic, the football boots. They're in front of me. I keep looking at them. It's not fair.
There's two, and the cool thing is also, do you see that they're actually the same color as sort of our Champions Chess Tour color scheme with the purple and the orange? It's a match made in heaven. Again.
CCT.
Yeah. CCT. Very cool. I mean, this must be the only chess football boots in the world. So cctauction.com and make your bid.
Okay, and meanwhile, the tension was eventually broken. White did go and capture that black rook because it was about to run away. And I think that was the last opportunity to capture it. Yes, white's light squared bishop was fantastic, but bishop for rook in the end, you have to be a bit materialistic there. And now Hans needs to be really timely with his next few decisions. I think you can't really allow black's light squared bishop, as we showed, to come and blockade those white pawns. You need to do something a bit more quickly, because if black reasserts control, then we'll see the material imbalance come into play. Right now, white has a rook and 2 pawns. That's 7 points for black's bishop and knight, worth only 6. But the bishop and knight are going to be fantastic if they find outposts, if they find squares that they can sit on safely. And that's why you have to create threats before that happens. And Hans now attacking the black knight in the middle of the board, using that bishop, the fianchettoed bishop, the Pulisic bishop, and his rook now in the center. That black knight only defended once. It pretty much has to move. Or you can defend it with your king, but now Hans is just going to step up with his rook, one square, and give a check, drive that king back.
And do you think that Hans and Magnus will repeat the position? Because we can see a scenario where he drives the king back one row and then retreats the rook to attack the knight and just keep that dynamic going.
It's possible.
It's a sharp position, right?
I'm hoping not, Jovanka. So the black king forced back, and if white steps back with his rook, the dilemma continues. Does black move the knight out the way? You have to retreat, maybe not to an ideal square, or does black try and repeat the position? Yeah, that's a good question. And the first question, though, is not whether Magnus will repeat by bringing his king back and forth. It's whether Hans is going to go for this. Because is there another option? That's the question. White's rook at the bottom of the board wants to be improved, but that gives black the necessary tempo to bring his light-squared bishop to the dream c6 square, and then black has full control.
No, you can't allow that. If you allow that, then it is basically, like you mentioned many times, it will just be rich pickings for black because they will have control. And not only that, they will start targeting white's weak pawns on the left. Yeah. And remember, black has one extra attacker than white.
The bishop and knight will be superior to the white rook if black gets another move or two. So psychology-wise, Jovanka, imagine you're in this position, you're playing the world champion, you've got half his time, Hans only with 3 minutes against 6, and he doesn't go for the draw. He plays for the win. Wow. That is courageous from the teenager. I think I would have taken the draw. I would have just repeated, brought the rook back, the black king moves, gave him another check.
Yeah.
And,
or at least made Magnus contort himself a little bit because, Magnus might have also not wanted the draw and might have made some concessions.
Yeah, really risky decision now from Hans Niemann. But that being said, he's doing one good thing. And when your opponent has minor pieces instead of a rook, always try to remove their remaining rook. So black's remaining rook is really important. So black's minor pieces will guard the diagonals. The knight will jump around. But the rook is needed on the lateral, on the lines, on the files. So trading it off makes a lot of sense from white's part. Magnus really doesn't want to trade off rooks. But can he run away safely? The problem is if black moves away with his rook, the white rook now that has just moved in the corner can zoom up the board and some big threats. So, OK, I think it's a brave decision. I'm not saying it's a bad decision by Hans, though. He's at least asking Magnus some difficult questions. To trade or not to trade, what would you do here, Jovanka?
I think I might be forced to trade because the rook going to the 7th row really scares me. And I think probably trade rooks and then put the bishop on its put the light squared bishop on its dream location, solidifying the position, and then slowly start driving the white rook back. Okay, and you see the trade there, and fully expecting the light squared bishop to move to the c6 square.
Yeah, simply no other option for Magnus. He had to trade rooks. And again, that's where chess players, they think, strategically, I don't want to do this, but I'm forced. And that's why Magnus spent just a minute or two double-checking things. And he doesn't go for the move you mentioned there, Jovanka. The most natural move in the position was to improve black's light-squared bishop. Instead, he's gone for a trade of dark-squared bishops instead. And Hans there leaning back, just surprised by this decision. It makes some sense because now it's purely a bishop and knight against a rook. But then again, remember, white has 2 extra pawns. So this one, it's very much in the balance. We're going to find out the answer, which is easier to play with. Would you rather have a rook or a couple of minor pieces?
Here, bishop and knight. 100 times out of 100. Why in this particular position? Because yes, white has 2 extra pawns, but take a look at both of those extra pawns. They can't move. They can't move, and not only that, white's rook needs to have flexibility to travel both sides of the board. Doesn't have that either. So I think Hans is in serious trouble.
Okay, despite the evaluation bar, really interesting. And one idea that unfortunately for white doesn't work, maybe the reason Hans reacted is pushing your pawn forward, because unfortunately after king takes rook, it looks like you're about to make a new queen on this square, but the black knight can actually hop back just in time to stop the white pawns promoting, and that means you're stuck. You have to retreat, as Jovanka mentions. If you can't push this pawn forward, it's just going to get blockaded. And the other extra pawn is this one, which is still far, far away from being any trouble at all. And yeah, talking of blockades, this bishop now sitting on its dream square. Again, you can't capture it and push your pawn forward because the black knight leaps back to the rescue and guards the promotion square. And actually a big, big threat in the position. Black was just simply planning, now that his bishop is so strong, to drop back with his knight and win the white pawns. Once one falls, the rest will fall as well. So Hans has had to go on the defensive, dropping back his rook and using his rook purely as a passive piece.
But
you're right, Jovanka, it's turning in Black's favour.
Yeah, I mean, look who's coming, King Benjamin, you know. Look at him, look at him, youthful, who wants to get in on the action, and now he's targeting that weak pawn, and that's, I'm afraid it's really bad news for Hans, because that's not the only pawn that's going to fall.
Yeah, once this guy drops, the pawn next to it will also fall. And yeah, that's why it's simply better to have two pieces rather than one. Even if one of them alone is worth less, the bishop and knight together just too strong. And the black king jumping to the rescue as well. Hans is doing a good job of complicating things. He's running forward with the white king, but it's not enough. And look at this, nasty knight check. Black is about to win this game because after king takes pawn, this would have been a decisive knight fork. Let's go back to the players. Magnus in full control once again.
Wow, okay, so why is the bar not as excited as you guys?
I think it's just the horizon of the computer. The computer sees that white can survive maybe the next 10 or 20 moves, only giving a +1 advantage for black. But yeah, for humans, we know that long-term, step by step, black will slowly round up this remaining white pawn on the left side. Black will slowly start advancing his pawns, and it's still going to take a long, long time, but black is the one in control. And we saw that actually on the player's body language just a minute ago. Hans kind of leaned back and shook his head because he knows long-term he's losing, and yeah, it's still some fight left, though.
Yeah, there's definitely still some fight, you know, if Hans can generate some kind of play on the right side of the board. But again, he has to do it in the right way. I mean, once again, his pawns on the right side, they could be weaknesses as well, because look at them. They're restrained. They can't move forward.
They're on light squares.
Yeah, they're on light squares, so problems.
And look at this black just indirectly lining up his bishop against those white pawns on the right side now. As soon as the black knight leaps out the way, those white pawns, I mean, they're weak. And white has weaknesses on both sides. That's the problem with rooks.
And a huge result for Jan-Krzysztof Duda, winning also Game 2 against David Anton. He must have turned that game around. He is now up by 2 points. He only needs a draw in Game 3 to be ready for the semi-final. Wow, it's drama for David Anton. He has to win the next game.
Yeah, Duda, he's really showing his form in this tournament now.
Yeah. It's been going up and down. Suddenly he's losing all his games, and then all of a sudden he's winning.
He's also been the recipient of a great amount of luck. And when you have that kind of luck, and I'm primarily thinking of his game against Erik Hansen, where he was totally lost, and then Erik unfortunately found the only move to trap his queen. And yeah, when you get that kind of boost, you sometimes feel that maybe things are going to work your way.
Yeah.
Like the cards kind of will fall into place and everything will work out beautifully. I don't know, and chess is all about confidence.
Yeah.
You know, we've said that time and time again, but it really is true. You've got to have that faith in your capabilities.
And we actually did do an interview with Duda before the tournament, and he did say that his biggest strength in chess is that he always gets lucky. It's something about Jan-Krzysztof Duda. But you make your own luck. What a great chess player. Okay, and you're still saying, David, that Magnus is heading for a win in this game.
It's looking very likely. If you look at Niemann's last few moves as well, White's rook is just waiting. There's nothing else to do. White's pawns are stuck, can't push. White's king has to stop the black king advancing on either side of the board. So there's this opposition between the kings right now. So White's rook is just going up, down, and he's hoping that Magnus can't find a winning plan. The problem for Magnus, though, is you've got to be a bit careful where you put the black knight and black bishop. You have to stop the white rook coming up to the 7th rank, for example, and starting to capture some pawns. So you need full control, and this is a nice move. Now white's rook can actually go up to the 7th rank, but then the black knight will come back to the centre of the board, delivering a fork. And there's the threat of this fork, this double attack right now. The white king and white rook are both potentially under fire from black's knight. So ideally in this type of position, you want your king and rook as far away from each other as possible, just to avoid any knight forks. There's also the threat of black's bishop going and capturing some of these white pawns on the right side. It looks like already Niemann has got only maybe 1 or 2 moves to even prolong the game. He needs to avoid dropping his pawns, but also avoid any knight forks.
All right. Well, if he loses this game, Hans Niemann, he will have to make a comeback at some point. Magnus will be up by 1 point, and actually in game 3, with a win, Magnus will be ready for the semi-final. But still, looking focused, Hans Niemann.
I must admit, I'm very surprised the evaluation bar says only 1.7 for black, because it looks completely winning.
Yeah, I'm also very surprised at that. Maybe it's just because it can see resources, like you say, far away that humans just can't. And also, psychologically, this is going to be a very difficult position for Hans to defend, because, I mean, he's shaking his head, but his position, it feels miserable. You know, the pawns are on light squares, none of the pawns can move, the rook has got no great targets to attack, and all he can do is just shuffle the king and rook backwards and forwards and just hope that Magnus just makes a mistake, basically.
I think just while you were talking, I was about to say this move as well. This just wins on the spot, I think, for Magnus, because white's remaining pawns on the right side, the G and H pawns, are both good to drop now. There's simply no way to protect them. Black's knight and bishop both look at the same pawn, the white G pawn, but more importantly, there's a knight fork in the air once more. The black knight wants to hop into the E4 square, checking the white king and picking up the white rook. You can't stop both threats. You either have to give up your rook or give up your pawns. And either way, you're not going to survive too much longer. I think this is just almost game over. I just don't see a way for Hans to even create a trick right now, set a trap. You have to just give up your pawns, and once you give up even more pawns, that's just it. That's just game over. White's rook is just impotent. It just has no way of fighting against the black knight and bishop.
Yeah, and it's just a model kind of endgame from Magnus. And it was actually something that we could kind of see. And actually, I think most people could see if you just take it on a step-by-step basis. I mean, all it was Magnus just slowly improving his forces, rearranging them, putting them on the good square. And then I like the way he moved his knight. He kept on threatening these knight forks. Every time that Hans was trying to get active, he was like, no, maybe, but you can lose your rook.
And another knight fork in the air. This is a check. And white's pawn now on the left side is just about to drop.
Yeah.
Magnus distracted all the white army on the right side. Now he's going and moving, changing tact, and going off to capture the white B pawn.
And David Navarra, he has been able to make a comeback in the match against Liam Le. Liam Le, he won the preliminaries, winning a bunch of games, but and also winning the first game in the quarterfinal. But a comeback by Navarra, so they are now tied after 2 games. So that's going to be an interesting one. And Jordan van Forest, he is fighting to make a comeback against Dingley Ren. The bar, I think, slightly to the middle in that game so far, but they're still playing. And here, Hans Niemann is fighting to survive in this game. David Ivanka is saying it's looking impossible.
Yeah, he's at least not resigning, and that's very instructive. Just never resign, especially in rapid chess. You might get a chance later. We've seen Magnus mouse slip in the past. We've seen him mouse slip actually several times. And still some little hope while there are so few pawns remaining on the board. If all of black's pawns disappear, it's just going to be a draw. And maybe he's just got some glimmer of hope to go after the black pawns later in the game.
I'm slightly puzzled by Magnus not capturing the pawn, though. I mean, I honestly thought that he would do that, and then we would see another big reshuffle of the bishop and the knight, and then slowly the pawn would get escorted to its destination. But here, you know, with his king move, he is allowing the rook to get slightly active.
Yeah, he's just trying to keep maximum control, but maybe he didn't need to. And by the white rook getting active, I guess you mean this check, Ivanka.
Yeah, well...
So white's pawns now drop, but at least the white rook gets maybe to the 7th rank. It manages to remove a couple of pawns from the board. Magnus slightly shook his head there. And black is running out of pawns. I think you need to keep one of them alive in order to win this game. And importantly as well, white does have a central pawn now, a passed pawn of his own. And that pawn might start running. Black's king now caught on the side of the board. Really not helping there. The black king just off in no man's land. Actually immobilized right now.
And now the bar is starting to listen to you guys, up to 2.4 for Magnus Carlsen. We also saw the donation bar for UNICEF. It's up to $84,000, so we have upped our goal to $100,000. We still have a few more days to collect money for the people in Ukraine. UNICEF is doing life-saving work for them, so please keep donating. All right.
Yeah, Magnus, again, coordinating his pieces. I mean, this is just, classic endgame technique. Just control your opponent's pawns. Look how white's pawn wants to start running up the board, but if it moves 2 squares forward, it simply gets captured. And, okay, Hans there just bringing his rook across. This, the only one remaining problem maybe is that black's king is still unable to get back into the game, but Magnus now, he actually sneakily offers a trade. White can come and grab this knight with his rook, and we would see the white rook disappear, we would see the black bishop and knight disappear, but black has 2 pawns, and we call them the trousers, one on this side, one on this side, like 2 legs of a trousers, and white's king can't stop them both. White's 1 pawn in the middle, easy to stop. So, okay, Magnus now just putting his knight back on an outpost, and the black king has an easy path back into the game. This one is slow, but sure, it's definitely going to be a win for black.
And it will be Harry, I think, who takes the honours in this tournament. Not this tournament, in this game.
Ah.
Yeah, that black H-pawn, if you look at it as well, it promotes on a light square. That's very important. The black light square bishop is going to escort it forward later on. So Hans, he's fighting really well. We've got to give him credit. We wrote him off already 20 or so moves ago, but he's still in this game, and he still needs a miracle to survive, but good fighting spirit from the youngster. That will take him far in his career.
Yeah, definitely. You have to be resilient. You have to have that grit, especially when the chips are down. And, well, he is fighting, giving a few checks and just trying to make life awkward for Magnus. And Hans has to move the king. Where to step it to?
Yeah, I must admit, I'm surprised Magnus has pushed his king to the centre, because I thought you wanted to escort this H-pawn, as you mentioned, down the board, and actually he's going to use his bishop to do that. It feels a bit superficial. Magnus's piece is a bit loose now. The black bishop no longer fixed on that outpost that it sat on. But, yeah, it's still... it's not spoiling anything for black, at least.
No.
You still have all the time in the world, and this pawn does advance.
And here comes Harry, and also the bishop, interesting enough, can also support the B pawn as well.
Harry and Barry, the H and B pawns. Yeah. 2 pawns are better than 1, and white's rook and white's king, they're going to be overworked, stopping the 2 pawns. And we should also mention that if white later on sacrifices his rook for the 2 black pawns, a bishop and knight against a king is a win. And Magnus, there's no doubt in the world, he knows how to win that one, how to checkmate the opponent. Some grandmasters still struggle with that one, bishop and knight versus king. But yeah, that's breakfast for Magnus. That's easy stuff. So
yeah, and unlike the rook and bishop versus rook, I mean, this one is checkmating with a bishop and a knight is pretty simple actually. Once you learn 3 kind of crucial positions, you can definitely checkmate with your eyes closed almost.
Yeah, I think I've seen Fabiano Caruana checkmate in an online game with around 12 seconds on his clock. So it's not easy for players, sometimes with hours on their clock. But if Caruana can checkmate with 12 seconds, bishop and knight versus king, then Magnus can do that. Especially, remember, he's getting 10 seconds after every move. And now this H-pawn, I mean, Magnus is being very brave with it, I must admit. This H-pawn not supported by its pieces anymore, but it's still hard for white to round up that pawn. It's still going to be a nightmare to go and bring your king across without walking into any knight checks. And white's rook, note how it can't go behind the H-pawn because any squares are covered by the black bishop. It's really hard to stop now, this pawn 2 squares away from promotion.
Yeah, very difficult as well, because I didn't quite like this move because the knight can actually join in the defense of the pawn.
The one thing black definitely doesn't want to do, which might blow the win, is push your H-pawn 1 square further now. It looks like you're about to make a new queen, but white's rook will slide behind you and you can't defend that pawn anymore. So you have to defend that pawn now.
See, that's what I would have done instantly.
But if we've been saying, if you'd had in the back of your head, teamwork makes the dream work, you would have thought, who else could defend the pawn? And you would have thought, okay.
Okay, so the knight defended the pawn. And now a check. This is really sneaky. because the black king had to be careful where it went. And at least now white's rook gets behind this pawn. Remember, rook's behind passed pawns. If you have a passed pawn, use your rook to support it from behind. If you are fighting against a passed pawn, put your rook behind it as well, just to stop that pawn running. But now both of black's pieces are defending it, the black bishop and black knight. And white's rook now is pretty much fixed here, stuck here eternally, just keeping an eye on this black pawn.
And just note this knight maneuver. Not only does he retreat the knight to attack the rook, but also covers some central squares that the white king could go to. And
yeah, I said that rook was stuck there eternally. I thought it had to be, because now it's gone off the other side. It no longer keeps an eye on the black pawn. But Magnus shaking his head. Yeah, maybe has he messed this a bit up?
I think he's messed this up a little bit. I mean, why did he put his bishop on that? I mean, I expected him to put the bishop on the c8 square.
Oh, look at Magnus's face. Has he just blown it? Because
oh, look at that.
He can't keep his black pawn defended anymore. The black bishop is fixed defending the other pawn, the b pawn. The black bishop can't guard both of them, and the black knight temporarily is dominated by white's king. If the black pawn advances, the white rook slides behind and back to square one. He has to win this game all over again now, Magnus. He's still maybe winning, but it's going to be very hard work. This h-pawn now is simply going to be picked off by white's rook coming across. And there we go. White's pawn in the middle, very sneaky from Magnus. This bishop can't be captured. If the white king takes this bishop, then the black knight hops forward with a knight fork, hitting the king and rook. That pawn was poisoned, so now it's bishop and knight and a pawn against a rook.
So now it's all about that b pawn starting over to push that one forward.
Yeah.
But now there's not much margin for error. If you lose the b-pawn, it's just a simple draw. You have to make sure that b-pawn costs white the rook. You have to win white's rook for that b-pawn. That's the only way to win now.
Yeah, but this one is so elementary as well, because it's a king and a rook that is actually going to start harassing black's pieces. And
I think it's still winning objectively, but as you mentioned, harassment of the black king is going to be the key to saving white. Look at this, white's rook pinning the black knight. White's rook is going to start checking, pinning, annoying you. And the one thing you can't do is let white give up the rook for one of your pieces and the black pawn. Black has to keep both minor pieces on the board if he wants to win this game. If the knight disappears or the bishop disappears, even if you win the white rook, and then it might be a draw. So, okay, Magnus just maneuvering his knight around. He's really made hard work of this. I just think he got a bit overexcited, a bit impatient earlier, just pushing his h-pawn down the board, not using the dreamwork, the teamwork.
Yeah.
He didn't really use the black king.
Yeah, and also, you know, he just did an outright blunder with his bishop. You know, he should have protected all his assets, and instead he got really careless, made a quick bishop move, and that was it. And maybe what he's doing was to blame.
Yeah, tucking in to the food again. Maybe he's just feeling he wants a bit more energy now, but yeah, you're right, Jovanka. Mistakes have come when Magnus is eating. And, okay, finally, black's pieces are well arranged, so there are no checks right now for white, and it will be time soon for that b-pawn to start marching down the board. Okay, Hans, how is he going to defend this? Maybe later he can rely on stalemate tricks if the white king comes down to the first rank. The one annoying thing for Hans as well is that black b-pawn promotes on a light square, and the light squares will be covered by black's bishop. If it promoted on a dark square, it would be so much more difficult to win this game.
Wow.
And if it was a corner pawn on the A file, it would be a draw. So, yeah, he's lucky it's a b-pawn, Magnus.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be a draw if it was an A-pawn, because the rook could actually just sacrifice itself for a knight. And then the king would run to the dark squares in the corner, and there's no way you can evict a king on dark squares in the corner.
Well, Hans Niemann, 30 seconds left. Now, game 2 between Jordan van Foreest and Ding eventually ended in a draw. Ding is still up by 1 point. Game 3 between those two will start in, I think, like 10 minutes. Duda and David Anton, they are about to start game 3, and that's going to be a must-win game for David Anton. Any other result, Duda will be ready for semifinals, and David Navarra and Liam Le, they are tied, winning 1 game each in game 3 between those two. Will also start very shortly, and he made that move with few seconds left on the clock.
And defending, as we've mentioned in the past, is a nightmare when you're low on time. It's better when you're the attacking side, going for your opponent's king, or playing with an advantage, because then you can just take a time out, gain a bit of time on the clock by playing a few quick moves. But when you're defending, every move counts. One slip and you'll lose immediately. And that's the situation Hans is in. Maybe he's losing anyway, but if you get low on the clock and make one blunder, you have to resign. So, okay, look at the Black Knight trying to reroute itself. The way Black wins this, his Knight will cover the dark squares, his Bishop will cover the light squares. So the pawn will be supported on dark squares by the King and Knight. Once it gets to the light squares, it will be supported by its Bishop. So that's the key. You've got to make sure your Knight is ready to cover the dark squares later. Okay, so now it's covered on the light squares by the Bishop, and no matter where the White King goes, the Black Knight will start to control the square, the dark square it wants to go to next, this pawn.
Okay, so Magnus basically wants his pieces on the light squares.
Yes, and that's actually how to checkmate when you have a Knight and Bishop together. You want them both on the same colour, for example, on light squares, because once your Knight's on light squares, you control dark squares. And
see, that's a super helpful trick.
yeah,
Knight and Bishop, you want them.
the same
Yeah,
colour.
on the same colour as your bishop, yeah.
It's useful in middle games, actually, openings as well. Just general strategy. We sometimes forget to look for patterns, but Knight and Bishop, same colour. Unless you have a Bishop pair, because then your bishops do all the covering, all the hard work.
That's true.
And okay, Magnus now using his King as well. So Black's Knight guards its Bishop, and now the King is coming.
And you mentioned it, Ivanka, time trouble for Hans Niemann. I mean, how difficult is this to defend with 13 seconds on the clock?
I think it's nigh on impossible. I really do think that. I mean, because the plan is so easy, you know, it's just to escort that pawn to its destination. And as David mentioned, you know, you just got to keep controlling the relevant squares. And here, okay, you want to maneuver your Knight and Bishop so that it can support the advance of the B pawn one more square.
Yeah, I'm hoping for two things in the rest of this game. One, that we hit move 100, just because that gives me a bit of personal satisfaction, shows a really long fighting game. And the second thing I'm hoping for is that Hans doesn't resign. I'm hoping that he gives up his rook for the black pawn at some point, because he has to, and then Magnus can demonstrate the technique, how to checkmate with Knight and Bishop against a king. Because I think everyone at home, that's really instructive. It might only come up once in your career, but you need to know how to checkmate there.
How many times has it come in your career?
0.
Really?
I nearly got it against Kramnik. I could have won. Actually, it was very similar to this. I could have won his rook for my remaining pawn, but I didn't see the way, and it was a draw. But I could have got Knight and Bishop versus King. So close. And I think I've reached it a couple of times, but my opponents didn't even force me to show that I knew how to do it. They just resigned. So a bit of frustration there. I'd been studying it for hours and hours in my life and not able to show that I know how to do it.
And the bar was up to 100 for Magnus Carlsen, so that means the checkmate is very close.
4 seconds. Okay, I've reached it twice in my career, and the first time, I must admit, I didn't know the techniques, so to speak. I knew
Because it's
roughly
so
one
difficult.
position. No, because I hadn't put the effort in. And then I memorized it because I had to teach it to my students, and I had to break it down in an accessible way. So I found these 3 positions, and then I was like, second time I got it, I just did it.
There's a few things, right? There's the box, there's the W, there's...
You told me that.
So the first thing is quite cool. You start off with all your pieces in a row. And
yeah, from there, from there your pieces can decide which squares to control. And
your Knight only moves in a W. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, meanwhile, it looks like White has just castled queenside in a way.
Yeah.
The King and Rook on the squares, they would have castled on. What's Black's King doing in the corner? It's very confusing. But meanwhile, the Black Pawn giving a check, about to promote. And
It's a big threat in the air with the Bishop giving a check to the King and snapping off the White Rook.
Yeah.
And there's also a big threat of Magnus just manoeuvring his pieces round to aid the promotion of the pawn.
I'm wondering if White can even give up his Rook now for the Black Pawn. And
Yes, he does it.
okay, he does it. So we're going to see this endgame. Yes, Hans isn't
He's
resigning.
playing it out.
He's going to force Magnus to show us how to checkmate now. And we will later see that technique of the Knight on light squares. Here we go. And the Bishop on light squares as well, controlling everything. And okay.
He did resign.
Oh, he did resign.
Oh.
A marathon game, not even move 100, but Magnus took the win.
96 moves. A marathon win for Magnus Carlsen. He is now up by 1 point in his quarterfinal match against Hans Niemann. With a win in Game 3, Magnus Carlsen will be in the semifinals. Hans, he needs at least a draw, and he has to win either the next game or Game 4 to take this one to tiebreaks. And David, we didn't get to see that fantastic ending to the game. Maybe you can show us.
Yeah, it's going to take a while, but let's go for it. So the first step is to force the white king into a light squared corner. Remember, you have to checkmate in the end, so you have to use your bishop to deliver the final blow. So you need to force the white king into either this corner or maybe even into the opposite corner over here on h1. And it takes a while to do this. It takes around 20 to 25 moves quite often, but let's just show the winning technique. So if the king, for example, does get stuck in the corner, or even the opposite black squared corner, there is a way to deliver the final checkmate. Essentially, the final touch will be delivered by your bishop. So you want to trap the king in this corner. Eventually, you force it there with your knight. And once the king does go to the corner, you trap it with your bishop. You have to put the king on the same color as your bishop. And there are other techniques. I recommend going to Chessable to check out some of the endgame lessons there, some of the endgame courses, because there are 2 or 3 patterns you definitely need to know in more detail, especially how to get the king from the dark squared corner down to the light squares. But either way, check out Chessable for this endgame. And yeah, Magnus, for sure, he would have known how to checkmate here, and he would have known how to trap Hans Neumann's king in the corner.
Very cool. It was a win for Magnus Carlsen. And now we're going to jump into game 3 with David Anton and Jan-Krzysztof Duda. And this is critical. The Spanish player, he has to win this game to have any hopes of taking it to tiebreaks. Jan-Krzysztof Duda is up by 2 points. He have won both game 1 and game 2. And with the black pieces here, I can see that Duda has played very quickly so far.
Yeah, and I must admit, I'm very surprised by the choice of opening by David Anton, because this is quite a well-known line, and I'm not sure this exact position, but at least a couple of moves ago, Duda had this in last season's tour. Duda, this is part of his solid repertoire. The top players in the world, they have different types of opening repertoires. They have openings for must-win situations, they have openings to be solid, and this is one of Duda's favourites when he wants to be solid. And look at this, we're about to see a series of mass exchanges on the c3 square. White's knight is about to get captured. And on that square, the knights will come off, a set of bishops will come off, maybe even queens will come off. And because David Anton needs to win, that's not a good sign. Exchanges only help black edge closer to that draw. And there we go, knights have left the board, bishops have left the board. Is David Anton going to trade the queens now? Yes, he has to. White's queen was just too passive. And Duda doesn't even trade the queens. He takes off a pawn. He has studied this before. Look at his clock time, 16 minutes now, gaining time. And yeah,
you're right about him studying this game. I've actually, looking at this, he's played this with the white pieces himself against Alexander Predka in the World Championship.
I think when I played against him in 2017 as well, Duda, I remember he'd played this line already, or I mean, the beginning of this line, not up to this position. So yeah, David Anton, I'm surprised he spent so much time on the clock. Maybe just, I don't want to say lack of research, but yeah, maybe just a poor opening decision in a must-win situation. Just allowing so many pieces and pawns to be traded already at this early stage, and also walking into his opponent's home territory, something he's played many times before.
Yeah, and one interesting thing is I'm just checking above, and I can see that Duda has had this with the black pieces as well against Wesley. So you're right, last year's tour.
We commentated on that game.
You have a better memory than me, David. No. They all merge into one.
I have selective memory. I only remember the exciting games and my wins, not the losses. So, okay, White's rook's attacking the black queen, but the black queen does have an escape route. She has 2 safe squares to run to now. She has to go back on this dark square diagonal. White is a pawn down temporarily, but White can regain the pawn. And the problem is running out of pieces. He needs to win, David Anton. He's played a great tournament so far. I think he gained some of the most points in terms of the tour ratings. And yeah, it looks like, unfortunately, this might be the end of his journey.
Yeah, it does look like this, because it's a very, very difficult position. It's just to win, actually. I mean, it requires a lot of assistance from your opponent, just because of the fact that, like you say, there aren't too many minor pieces on the board. And the position is relatively simple. If more trades are made, then the margin for winning becomes even lower.
Yeah, the problem for White is that if the queens come off, it's going to be a draw. If the rooks come off, it's going to be a draw. If the bishops come off, it's going to be a draw. You need to keep all the pieces on the board, but it's just going to be impossible to do that. There are too many open lines. Black can pretty much force you to make exchanges, make some trades. And I mean, the slight advantage for White here, the reason the evaluation bar gives White a tiny preference is that White's pawn structure is better. Black has 2 isolated pawns on the A file and the D file. White only has 1 isolated pawn, but it's an insignificant advantage. It's purely symbolic here. It doesn't actually kind of turn into anything tangible. And okay, White now offering a queen trade. This could be accepted. You don't even need to go for it yet with Black. You can allow this to happen on your own terms. But you can tell even on David Anton's body language, he's not too excited about his chances here. He knows that with best play, this should be a draw. Duda, I think this is quite instructive as well. Just taking a timeout, calming himself down. He knows he's had a great opening. He's rock solid in this position, and he's just a few accurate moves away from the semi-finals.
And I mean, still more than 15 minutes on the clock, more than the time he started with in this game in move 21. And actually seeing the second game they played as well, Duda won that game with more than 7 minutes left on the clock. So he's apparently playing very fast and confident today.
Yeah, maybe he's been taking a leaf out of Levon Aronian's book, Levon on the tour last year, and super impressive, just playing instantly, playing on his opponent's nerves, playing on their time trouble. It takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a lot of confidence to kind of trust your instincts and not kind of double check everything, over-calculate, overthink. But yeah, Duda, he slowed down at the right moment as well, just before this queen trade.
It's actually the first new move of the game. You know, this hasn't been played before. Most other people, you know, Wesley actually moved his rook to the middle of the board, and that game actually was a win for Wesley eventually.
Okay, this rook?
The other rook, the C2 rook moved to D2. Yeah.
So White did win that one, but I think that's with a lot of help from Black.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So David Anton lifting the queen up. I don't think Black should rush to trade and take these off the board. Maybe it's okay as well. I guess you can just shuffle your rook across and try and go after White's weak pawn here. But the reason I don't want to do this is because instead of lifting this rook across, if you want to go for the more natural other rook, then suddenly there is a small problem after a trade of rooks here. You cannot actually grab this pawn because of something we've talked about quite a lot, and it's the back rank checkmate. This king has no breathing space, and it actually gets trapped on this back rank. So you can't go for all these trades immediately. You have to be a bit sneaky about it for Black. You need to get this position, but you need to have one of your pawns pushed forward in order for your king to escape. So in the current position, I'm expecting Duda maybe to trade, or I was going to say the other option, most likely go active with your queen. You want the queens off, but more importantly, you want this pawn off the board. The only way White will win this game is actually if this pawn later on becomes a passed pawn. So you want to remove all potential danger in the endgame. You want to remove it now. So if these pawns get exchanged, if this disappears and this disappears, Black is just very, very close to the draw now.
All right, and some other games. Game 3s have also started. Liam Le against David Navarro. Actually, already the bar over to Liam Le's side. They are tied before this game. So anything can still happen in that match. And Ding and Van Forest also started Game 3. Ding is up by 1 point. And if he wins this game, he will be ready for the semi-final to face either Magnus Carlsen or Hans Niemann. All right, but in this one, it's looking like it's going to be a short day, I guess, then for Jan-Krzysztof Duda to get to the semi-finals.
Yeah, it's looking like that, and that's definitely something that we at home, the observers, should be feeling. But I can tell you, Jan-Krzysztof Duda should not be thinking like that.
Right.
Instead, he needs to be thinking about the game and just taking it on a move-by-move basis. He can think about the semi-finals when he gets there.
Yeah.
And until then, until it's kind of signed, sealed, and delivered, he needs to just focus on what needs to be done. And that is just to address the issues. And at the minute, as David highlighted, it's just all about getting rid of that one remaining pawn on the left side of the board. And he's doing this.
Yeah, he's doing it very effectively. And I've been very dismissive of White's chances. Oh, look at David Anton there. He's not happy at all. He knows this is about to be a draw. But remember, Duda did lose from a similar position to this in the past, last season against Wesley. So that was actually just due to a big kind of blunder, a bit of just maybe miscalculation. But this game, we're headed to a draw almost instantly. The queens have come off, a set of pawns have come off. The last two pawns remaining, I mean, everything's symmetrical now on the right side of the board, on the right half. All that's remaining are these two other pawns on the queen side, and those guys are destined to get traded off. white's pawn, white's b-pawn, is eyed up by the black bishop. And
is there any hope now that the bishop is attacking the rook, and the one defender of the a7 pawn is going to be moving?
Possibly. Problem is, the black rook could just sidestep one square, just attack that white b-pawn, or black can even offer a trade of bishops, maybe. You have to be slightly careful in that regard, but actually, off the trade of bishops, yeah, it's still a draw, but white does have one trick at least up his sleeve. So, okay, just move the black rook onto the b file, temporarily go one pawn down, but the white pawn is just too weak, unfortunately. So we'll see that happen, I think, in a moment. The one trick, let's just show it because it is a bit flashy, is that if black does jump into the center, then white does have an opportunity to play rook takes pawn. Really flashy, and it's all to do with the back rank that we mentioned. Note how white's king is also a bit trapped behind its own pawns, but black can't break through because this square, which you want to use to check, is actually covered by white's bishop. So black can't checkmate, whereas white definitely can. After rook takes rook, this ends in back rank mate. Also, bishop takes bishop does end in back rank mate too. You remove this defender in the corner after rook takes, bishop takes, and now checkmate on the next turn. The king trapped. So actually that would be a bit of a blunder. And I don't think Jan-Krzysztof Duda is going to fall for it. All he needs to do is move this rook out of the eye line of the white bishop. For example, step it across or to this square. He's actually setting a trap himself. Very sneaky. Now rook takes pawn is simply going to be met by a rook check. And now white is the one back rank checkmated. And it's all about these kings. The kings lacking breathing space, lacking air. And that means white can't go pawn hunting. And if white can't go pawn hunting, he has to take a timeout and push this guy forward. That happens, and then black now can simply go after this white b-pawn. You go for it with this rook, because the other rook will keep guard of the black king on the top row, on the 8th rank.
Yeah, totally agree with that philosophy. And Duda does indeed play the rook move you suggested. And I just wanted to show you a selfie from Cupido Baron, who says that Garfield from Port Elizabeth, okay, you see rook takes pawn being played, South Africa, wonders why I make a big fuss about the chess and not give him some attention. Oh, we have a jealous cat. And so whilst I was talking, we have a big flurry of trades and everything is level.
Yeah, this is one of the most drawish positions in chess you will ever see. Simply, all the pawns are getting traded, the rooks have come off. David Anton knows his tournament is about to be over. Duda is 1 or 2 moves away now from the semi-finals. We're just going to see the players repeat. There's simply not enough material left to deliver checkmate. And there we go, we have the draw.
Will we see some celebration from Jan-Krzysztof Duda? No, he just runs off. And look at David Anton, disappointed. Of course, I think this was the first time David Anton has made it to the knockout stage, but it ends here in the quarterfinals in the Charity Cup. Jan-Krzysztof Duda has been on fire today, played 3 great games and is ready for the semi-finals. We are hoping to get a comment from the Polish chess player to hear about his excitement. He's going to face the winner of Liam Le against, he is the winner between Liam Le against David Navarra. The other matches still going on. We can take a look at the standings and results so far in our quarterfinal matches. The other players are currently playing. So Liam Le, he won the first game. David Navarra, he made a comeback, winning game 2. They are currently playing game 3, and looking at the bar in that one, it's looking good. Yeah, looking good for Liam Le. This one, Ding Liren, he won the first game. Jordan van Forest was not able to make a comeback in game 2. They are playing game 3, and if Ding wins that, he's gonna be ready for the semi-final, sorry. Magnus Carlsen winning game 2 against Hans Niemann. Game 3 is about to start in a few minutes, and if Magnus wins that, he will be ready for semi-finals. Hans Niemann needs at least a draw. And this one, Jan-Krzysztof Duda, after only 3 games, is the winner of this quarterfinal. He is ready for semi-finals in the Charity Cup. How impressed have you been with Duda? Yesterday he lost 3 games in the final day of preliminaries, and today just back winning everything.
Yeah, on the second to last day, he lost three games, but I told you it didn't matter because he won the final game. And then after that, he was able to capitalize on some luck and some good play, and he easily qualified. And now it just feels like things are working his way. He was just simply a better player than David Anton, and when the moments and opportunities arose, he took them.
Definitely. And we are hoping to get the comment from the first player ready for semi-finals while we wait for Jan-Krzysztof. We want to take a look at your selfies. Thanks everyone for sharing your selfies and for supporting your favorite players. Some of you probably big fans of Jan-Krzysztof Duda, the first player to reach the Charity Cup semi-finals, and we're joined by the winner of the quarterfinal match. Congratulations, Jan-Krzysztof.
Thank you.
What a day! This went by really fast. What has this day been like?
Yeah, it's of course great to reach the semi-final and win such convincing manner. I don't think I have played like very great chess today. I just didn't commit too much errors and just grabbed my chances. And I think that succeeded actually.
Yeah. Now, in the first game, I mean, you still had so much time left on the clock. Also, in this final game, you played super fast. Have you had some sort of tactics when it comes to time and your clock today?
Not really. Yeah, it just happened, that I didn't have much opening difficulties, I think, in both of my games with black pieces. I mean, in the last one, I just more or less knew Fiori till the very end. I mean, sort of. I had played this variation before. And I think it's just a straight equalizer for black. So, yeah, probably on his place, I would have also played this system because it's kind of interesting and pretty good actually to try to win the game, but yeah, I just had a solution coming for this, and yeah, and earlier, I mean, okay, the first game was just kind of level. I mean, I played the Barin, and okay, I was slightly worse, of course, with this not so great knight on c6, but I'm not sure it was anything serious, and then just played one too aggressive move, I think, and got his rook almost trapped in the middle of the center. So, and yeah, and I just converted it pretty smoothly, I think. I mean, I could have played better at times, but in general, I'm pretty satisfied with my play. And in the second game, that was the worst game, I think, by my standards, because yeah, I mean, it was in Berlin, but I mean, it transposed to Berlin with this a6 inclusion, and okay, there are many variations there, setups for white, but I mean, I just played something. And instead of playing like knight d2, knight c4, which is kind of variation, one of the most popular I played, like knight c3, knight e2, knight g3, knight f1, knight d3, and only then knight c4. Of course, something extremely ridiculous, but then he just blundered a trick and knight takes a5, and it's just game over. So at the end of the day, this maneuver wasn't that bad, I think.
Well, I have to say, Arizam, you seem very excited and happy about the way you play today, basically.
Yes, I just avoided these bad moments which happened to me yesterday and 2 days ago. So, yeah, I think it's just vital to be very dangerous opponent, just not to have these blind moments. And and that's precisely what I did today.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but will this be your first semi-final in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour?
Yes, I think so.
So what is that like to reach the semi-finals?
Yeah, it's of course very great. But I think the most difficult for me is actually to get this from top 8. I had a very good day too, and I was sharing second and third with Magnus, right? And it seemed that there wouldn't be much issues with reaching top 8, but I mean the third day was so so pathetic, so ridiculous for me. I was 3 games in a row, and then suddenly it was I wasn't so sure anymore about qualifying. So I'm very happy to be here, and and today was just a good day at the office, and hopefully tomorrow will be the same.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to follow. We wish you best of luck in semifinals, and again, big congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. All right, we're soon going to head into Game 3 with Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann. But before we do that, we have to remind you about the auction for the Christian Pulisic really cool chess football boots. Now, less than 45 minutes left to make your bid for these unique, probably the only chess football boots in the entire world. And they're going to be signed by Chelsea star Christian Pulisic himself. Current bid, a little bit over $1,000, but this is once in a lifetime. So cctauction.com to make your bid for these football boots. 44 minutes left. And now we're going to jump into Game 3 with Hans Niemann and Magnus Carlsen. If Magnus wins this game, he will be ready for the semi-final. The bar slightly over to his side.
Yep, it's very early days in this game. This opening was the Italian game. And the players, after debating maybe a slightly rare line, slightly rare move order, at least, of the Italian game. We've seen it many times, at least the opening on the tour. Now we've reached this position, and it's level material. But the one reason maybe white has to be happy here is that the black queen is vulnerable in the middle of the board. The rule is, the general rule of thumb, don't bring your queens out too early because she's the most valuable piece. Anytime she gets attacked or hit, she has to run away, she has to flee. And that's what's happening right now. Magnus just kind of rerouting his bishop to attack this black queen. And Hans has a problem, where to put her. He has to take a step back. Does she go the whole way up to the top of the board, the safest square? Does she just step 1 square back? Either way, pros and cons, she might be a target for the next few moves. Still roughly in the balanced, but maybe easier for white to play, at least on the next 2 or 3 moves.
And look at that, Game 3 between Liam Le and David Navarra has ended with a win for Liam Le. All games ending up with a winner so far in that match, and Liam is now up by 1 point. So it's going to be must win in Game 4 for Navarra to take it to tiebreaks with a draw or a win. Liam will be ready for semifinals to face Jan-Krzysztof Duda. And these two, they are fighting for a semifinal spot to face the winner of Ding versus Jordan van Foritz. It's looking good for Ding so far. He is up by 1 point.
And remember, if Magnus wins this one, he's through.
That's true, yeah.
So Hans, he needs to play solid in a way, but he also maybe wants to take some chances when he comes to strike back, to equal the scores. And with black, it's hard to do that. So Magnus, interesting choice of opening. The Italian game has been kind of hit the backbone of his whole opening repertoire throughout last season's tour and clearly at the beginning of this season as well. And in the World Championship match, we saw him defend from the black side. He plays it from the white side. He's the world's leading expert. So for Hans, I'm slightly concerned that he's gone into it so willingly. But OK, let's see how the next few moves go. And wow, big decision there, because Magnus was just hinting at a pawn sacrifice. It was only a short-term thing. But Hans now very ambitiously pushing in the center. Jovanka, What do you think of this one?
I don't like it.
For black?
I don't like it for black. And I'm just thinking about the counter-attack. I mean, I'm just running through the possibilities. CCT, remember? Checks, captures, and threats. And I'm thinking maybe white can actually jump forward with the knight and attack the queen. And this will mean that the knight on f3 can actually now jump into the center, or at least has the possibility to.
Mm-hmm. The white knight now can leap forward rather than retreat to a passive square. You don't want to put your knight on the edge of the board, for example. You don't really want to go back this way and block in your bishop. Instead, you want to jump to the center of the board. And yeah, Hans, he's lost so much time with his queen. The queen came out one time earlier, then she took a step back, then she took another step back. So he's actually moved his queen 3 times in the first 15 moves. And she ends up back on the square she started the game. Mm-hmm. So Hans losing a lot of time. And it's not just the queen, but it's also this bishop.
Yeah.
In the Italian game, it's always comparing this bishop to its counterpart over here. And white's bishop, at least once the knight jumps out the way, is actually staring already down at the black king. Whereas this black bishop is just staring at a really well-fortified pawn. Oh, sorry, not that one, this one, in the center of the board. And yeah, this black bishop just feels like a bystander. White can trade it off at any point, but I don't think he even wants to because it's such a bad piece. At the very maximum for black, you hope that your opponent trades it off, for example, in this situation. But then even if that happens, you end up with some ugly doubled pawns anyway. So it feels like Magnus has a clear advantage after he jumps forward with his knight. Some real problems already. Knight takes bishop maybe on the cards. White can simply gang up against this pawn as well. He's done this. He has jumped in. And in the current position, after black blocked with his bishop, so many tempting moves. You can bring this bishop out, you can bring this bishop to the side of the board, create a pin on this diagonal. You could even capture, as mentioned, as a backup plan.
Could you capture the knight as well? I mean, how is that? And try to say, hey, let's lock out your bishop. Yeah. Or is that maybe... That's
also very tempting. You also give your opponent double pawns here, isolated pawn here, weak pawn here. Yeah, it just looks really anti-positional for black. And still some dynamic hope if you can crack open the center, break open, and undermine white's stronghold in the middle here. But it still takes a while. It looks like one-sided traffic.
Yeah.
I won't say opening disaster, but in the current position, this one, white just has so many pleasant options. And it's hard to say what's going right for black at the moment. I think the best you can hope for is to exchange off some pieces simply. But that, remember, won't help Hans anyway if he's a point down in the match.
Yeah, he needs to score a point here, basically. You know, a loss is just disaster for him. So, no, this is not ideal for him. And Magnus, like you say, great expert, great feeling for these type of positions. And, yeah, well, Magnus going to make a decision, many attractive options. And I wanted to share with you some selfies again, because we like to see where everyone is watching the show from. And Jan Frederick Torp says that they're quarantining in Mexico.
Ooh.
Oh, nice location. And
well, Mexico. Magnus and Hans celebrating some Mexican food today with their tacos.
Yeah, of course. How did I not make the connection? Kaja, you're on point. And, OK, so Magnus developing the dark squared bishop. And Hazel asks a very important question. What training would you guys recommend for a 2-month-old? Perhaps a pawn-shaped pacifier? Yeah, I think so. I think you can get them to play with the chess pieces just so that they get used to the idea of chess.
I heard that, yeah. To get, you know, with for example, football, you want to give the kids the ball from they're very, very small just so they get used to the ball. And I guess with chess as well, just get used to the pieces.
Yeah, exactly. And my friend has a very young kid, and at the minute they're kind of like playing with the chess pieces as opposed to actually properly playing. They're like throwing it around. But, you know, he's getting used to the idea that the chess is a game. And we also have a really lovely tweet that I wanted to read out from Kevin B, who says that chess hasn't been a thing in my life for years, but recently got back into it. And for the last week with the Charity Cup, have been riveted to the screen here in Canada. Oh, what a lovely, lovely story. Thank you so much, Kevin, for that tweet. And thank you for watching, and a big hello to you.
Super happy that people are rediscovering chess. That is great.
And meanwhile, Magnus rediscovering his food.
Yeah.
It's,
he still hasn't finished it.
No, it's a bottomless bowl of tacos. It's
Like
great.
Mary Poppins in her bag, it's just
Yeah.
bottomless, just food this time. And as mentioned, he did play one of the few tempting moves we highlighted, White's dark squared bishop developing itself to a good square. And okay, Hans, he's at least trying to fight back. He's counter-attacking. He's now hitting this white bishop with his knight. So I'm expecting White's dark squared bishop just to take a step back. There's a couple of safe squares for it. And still, the problem remains for Black. The dark square bishop traps, and now Black's pawn in the center of the board under fire from White's rook. I don't think you should get too greedy right now and capture this pawn with the white rook, because that would just initiate some complications unnecessary to calculate at this point. You just play on strategic principles, keep all your pieces safe, you have the better pawn structure. I just feel maybe this sounds harsh, but some inexperience on Hans's part in this type of pawn structure, this type of opening. Because, okay, Magnus does go for the move I said was just too complicated to calculate. He did invest a bit of time doing that. But yeah, it feels like Hans, he went for a structure that's good for Black if Black can attack the white king. But otherwise, it's one that you nearly never want to go for. And, okay, I guess the reason here is that White can just take a pawn and defend the bishop next to this rook in the process. And, yeah, this is where these really top players, these elite players like Magnus, are better than the rest, better than these 26, 2700s, because I would have just taken the simple way out and started calculating 3 or 4 moves down the line. Magnus knows when to calculate, when to kind of turn his strategic advantage into a material one. And it's just transforming those different advantages and changing things. That's where the top players really thrive.
And that's a really good point, because I see a lot of people on Twitter saying, hey, I'm playing the same openings as Magnus, but I'm losing and he's winning. And like you say, it's not just the opening, it's the middle game and it's those shifts. And, well, Magnus has a pressing issue. What's he going to do with his rook that's under attack?
Yeah, it's time for Magnus to sacrifice.
It definitely is.
I mentioned material advantage. Now he's got to actually give Black the material advantage, at least temporarily, but it's about the quality of the pieces and pawns left on the board. And White's rook is under attack from a pawn. It has to continue defending the bishop next to it, but it can't. So why not give up the rook for Black's light square bishop? Sacrifice there, and then get your own bishop to safety. And once the dust clears, Black is actually 1 point up. Black will have a rook in exchange for White's bishop and pawn, but look at Black's pawn structure, especially on this left side of the board. That bishop we highlighted, that dark square bishop, a bit dead. And yeah, it's
a common theme, actually. We actually saw this in the first game. Hans got his bishop trapped, and it's going to be the problem again. But this is something I have noticed with Hans. He, I think maybe it's because of studying with computers, or maybe just the new generation, that they break rules. They're quite happy to have this bad pawn structure because they want the dynamism. They don't care so much about trapped pieces because they're looking for other things to compensate. And Hans, I've noticed, likes to push pawns. Like me.
He makes very committal decisions. And 95% of the time, maybe, or 95% of the time, it's fine. These young players who grew up with computers, they can get away with breaking the rules because they calculate extremely well. They see into the future, they see, okay, I might have the worst pawns ever, I might have bad pieces, but I'm surviving. And they can calculate forcing lines very deeply, maybe better than previous generations. And there we go, Magnus sacrificing his rook. Against the very top players in the world who calculate just as well as them, like Magnus, these strategic factors actually become really, really important. So that's maybe why the next generation is still struggling to kind of overtake Magnus and the rest of the 1990 generation. And I think Hans in a few years, once he maybe finds that balance between kind of following the rules and when to break them, when to calculate, when to think long term, then he'll really hit the top level and break into the world's elite. But meanwhile, White sacrificing and Black at least trying to scare the white king now with this queen sortie. I guess Black wants to swing the rook across on the 6th rank and go for checkmate, but it's easily defended. White's queen will just defend her king and the pawns in front of it. So, yeah, despite the fact Black has the rook versus bishop and pawn advantage, White with the overall edge here, because the pieces are so strong, especially in the center of the board.
Yeah, I mean, talking about adding pressure to the center, I'm drawn to the move, moving my queen and putting it on the f3 square, so that it starts looking at the knight and gets ready to ask some questions.
Yeah, so bringing the knight out, the queen out, sorry, and also look at the tension on this diagonal. There's a lot of pieces in the way, but the bishop and the king are lined up together. Okay, he does go for this, the most natural
Yeah.
move in the position. And for example, if black is too careless, just moves a rook, for example, then suddenly some real problems. After a trade here, white can start pushing pawns forward. White can even just capture this knight. And this pin is just really scary for black. I think there's even actually more effective ways, but this is just one example. And black now just in big trouble, because what do you do about this diagonal? There's also problems on this diagonal. There's a kind of just everything on the light squares is all in white's favor. And maybe you just have to get the king out of the way and just out of the eye line of this bishop. What else to do?
That is the kind of like defensive rule 101. I think you just get your king out of the way. And I almost never forget this kind of... I was going through this book called Bent Larsen's Good Move Guide. Now, this is a book from the early 80s or 70s. And there's some kind of quite nice positional examples. And one of the first puzzles was all about where to put the king. And he made this point, they should never put a king on an open diagonal. And okay, so we see Hans overprotect the knight in the center, but it's not going to...
It's not good. I was going to say, the reason you should put your king here as well is that you don't want to put it in the corner, because then you walk into the eye line of the other bishop. So the two white bishops, there are still some pieces in the way, but they do have great eyesight and they really scare this black king. So Hans deciding in the end he didn't want to improve his king. I think that was the number one priority, but he moved his rook across instead. And still, the issue is, one of the ideas I highlighted, Ivanka, what happens? I mean, there are other tempting moves. You could drop the knight back this way, for example, still maintaining this pin. But what happens if you go really direct, route one, straight for the goal, and you just capture this bishop? Black has to take back with the pawn, and then you push this pawn forward. Now you hit the knight. You're just trying to get everything out of the way of this diagonal. And if the knight retreats, for example, just trying to find a safe square, then you step forward
with
again.
the pawn.
Yeah.
Step forward with the pawn, and then the knight goes back, and troubles are not over because you just... Okay, we're going to see it.
White has a passed pawn. Now, look how the bishops just protect everything. White's bishop is a beast in the center of the board. And there we go. Magnus looking for the forcing moves. As we always talk about, checks, captures, threats. He played a check. Oh, no, sorry, he played a capture. And then now he's playing a threat. And this is just going to win. I just don't see any way Hans can even defend this game. Once the knight moves out the way, wherever it goes, no matter what square, you push this pawn forward, create the pin, and you win. It's, looking simple for Magnus right now.
Looking at the bar, and the bar is telling me, yep, 100% confirmed. This is a devastating position for Magnus. Pawn takes pawn.
Yeah, out of desperation, Hans gives back his rook for a bishop, but now white is simply one pawn up for free. And it's not just that, this is a discovered check, as we call it. White's pawn stepping out of the way of its bishop, the bishop hitting the black king. And when the black king moves, white can just gobble up another pawn. White is 2 pawns up for free. And white has the strategic advantages. Black's attack, it's purely imaginary here. It's just non-existent. The white queen guards everything. White's king, super safe.
So you'd capture the pawn then?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think you can get away with things. Actually, you do have an option of pushing a pawn, hitting the black queen as well, maybe. Options.
That's nice. I like that move.
I was actually going to underestimate black's threat of bringing the rook down to attack the white queen. I thought the white queen could just move, but then maybe some complications. So yeah, Magnus just hesitating here.
Yeah, there's no need to rush it. I really love your move, actually.
You could hit maybe the black knight with a pawn as well.
Right, yeah, and using the same idea. So I love that idea. So attack the knight, force the knight to move, because the knight can't capture the pawn because the king just steps up the board.
Hit this knight now, and for example, as you mentioned, knight takes pawn, the most obvious move. Now the king can just step forward. Which square? This square?
Maybe, that square is nice. Both.
There's one trick I noticed. Maybe if the king steps forward to this square, the rook can come down. It gets a bit tricky because after the queen captures, there's a knight fork, a knight check. But either way, this is complications that we don't really need. And the other move we mentioned, this looks strong for white, but Magnus finds an even stronger one, pushing Harry the h-pawn up the board and undermining the black queen. And the reason this is so strong is because you just destabilize these two pieces. These, remember, they are the dream attacking duo, attacking combination, but once you destabilize them, they lose their coordination. And now this capture walks into a simple double attack, a simple fork, 2 pieces under attack, and Magnus is about to win. The knight jumps forward with a check, the king of course, steps forward, out of the check, and now a queen trade, but this only favors white. Now you can even just take the queens off the board, capture this pawn, and this poor rook is forced on the defensive against these two pawns. It can't hold them both. I think Magnus is going to win. And evaluation bar says +5. This endgame, yeah, it's just hopeless for black.
Yeah, not a chance. I mean, it will take a miracle.
Fight, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was Hans were feeling really disappointed with this game because the other games, you know, there were real fights and they could have gone either way. And here it just feels like one bad move and Magnus took all the momentum and it was totally Magnus dominating the game. I don't feel that Hans had a chance at all. So, okay, you know, the rook has to go and start looking at that B pawn. Okay, he brings back his knight.
The knight at least can do some of the defensive work, but unfortunately white's rook is going to start introducing itself to the game. And once that white rook joins in, I think the black pieces are overwhelmed. The rook, the bishop, and the white pawns together. Yeah, I mean, they're more than a match for the black rook and knight.
Yeah, I was going to say there was one tiny danger, but there's not even at that. I was like, oh, you know, maybe if the knight can combine itself with the rook in the right formation, there might be something. But no, there isn't.
Yeah, unfortunately, white's king is just too safe. And look at these two white pawns, both sat on the 6th rank, 2 squares away from promotion. One of them is going to cost black a knight or rook. And yeah, I mean, it's just hard to even find words for this position because it's just nothing else to be done. Hans looking at his last game of the Charity Cup.
Yeah, and if you look at the promotion square of the e-pawn, the king's pawn, it's on a light square. And what does white have? Lo and behold, a white squared bishop. So yeah, these are the things that are going to be just absolutely killing for white.
Yeah, so the black king trying to gallop over and trying to rush over to the rescue of its pieces, but as you mentioned, Ivanka, this pawn stepping forward, it's just too strong. And this one white pawn, the e-pawn, is paralyzing black's rook right now. Black's rook is stuck in front of this pawn. And then the b-pawn will simply step forward, deflect away the black rook, and white will make a new queen. And Hans, you can tell on his body language, he's almost ready to throw in the towel and resign. But just a couple of last moves. Why not? Just show the audience, show us why the position is lost. But no more tricks, unfortunately, for him. And there we go. 2 pawns, they were on the 6th rank, they've moved up, they've graduated to the 7th rank. And now the black knight attacking the white rook, so be careful, but you can flick in a check, gain a bit of time, and I think we're about to have it. There we go. Magnus takes the win, about to make a new queen.
And he's ready for the semi-final. Magnus Carlsen will play another semi-final match in the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour after 3 games, knocking out the American teenager Hans Niemann. Dominant performance by Magnus, would you say today, Ivanka?
Yeah, I mean, it was a fight for the first 2 games, but this performance that we saw in Game 3 was just commanding. Yeah. And Magnus really showing us an instructive game.
Yeah. Should we take a look at it, David? I mean, Hans Niemann, he basically had to win this game.
Yeah, we saw earlier it was a bit of a... I mean, the opening just wasn't ideal. He walked into something that Magnus knows really well, but just to show the finishing touches, Magnus in this position completely killed black's counterplay. There are some hints of an attack against the white king, using the black queen, using the black knight as well against this pawn. And rather than get greedy, which was my first instinct, and capture here, Magnus decided, okay, it's time to trade queens, get rid of all remaining danger, and that won the game for him. He stepped forward with this pawn, forcing the black queen to take it. He stepped forward with this pawn, forcing the black knight to give a check because of this double attack. So after this check, he realized, okay, black's queen has to stay protecting her knight. She has to step across 1 square. And after this queen trade, we saw white establish these 2 monstrous, these powerful passed pawns. This pawn and this pawn, as we saw, later won the game for white. Hans, maybe just a little bit of opening work there would have saved him, but either way, just after he got his chance, Magnus with perfect technique.
And ready for semi-finals. We're joined by world champion Magnus Carlsen. Congratulations.
Thank you.
After only 3 games, Magnus, have you felt in complete control the whole day?
No, not at all. I thought the first and second games were very, very tense and pretty tough. So I think
up to a certain point, I was definitely in command of both of those, but they got a bit out of hand. He fought really well there in both of those games, and they were both pretty tough. But I guess the last game was relatively easy. I think he made a poor decision there when he went for e4 instead of e takes d4, which I think was reasonable. But that was clearly dictated by the match situation at that point. He felt that he kind of needed to win this game as black, or at least to keep the game alive a little bit more, rather than play for a draw in a somewhat worse position. But as you could see from what happened in the game, that really just meant that he was positionally lost. So after that, it was a relatively straightforward mopping up job.
Okay. Now, were you aware of his chessable course coming out and avoiding the Jobava London in game 2?
No. I mean, I'm aware that he has worked on a course on that opening, but I wasn't specifically avoiding it. That's for sure.
All right. Well, Magnus, how will you describe your playing now so far, heading into semifinals?
I would say it's been okay, and probably need to play better in the last 2 rounds to win. And
I mean, semifinals, we don't know who you will face right now, but right now it looks like it will be Ding. Will you have if it is Ding, will you have a strategy sort of playing against him? I think it's like 3 a.m. in the morning for him. He has struggled with being a little bit tired. Can you play on that?
I don't know. I think I'll just play, and then we'll see how it goes. I have no special plans of like trying to prolong the match or anything, but it's not even certain that it is him that I will play. But I will follow the rest of his match now with interest, of course.
Now, Magnus, of course, in the Charity Cup, we are fundraising money for UNICEF. Among other, we're doing a Play Magnus charity challenge. Today we had Christian Pulisic playing actually a great game of chess. Do you get some sort of joy from hearing other sports stars being such a big fan of what you do?
Yeah, that's always fun, and I've heard great things about his game, so I'll be eager to see the video.
And did you actually know he's such a big chess fan that he actually have a specially engraved bishop on his football boots?
No, I didn't know that.
It's very cool, and we're auctioning them out. Well, Magnus, thank you for joining us, and good luck in the semifinals.
Thank you.
Remember, those football boots, they are up for auction, and only a few minutes left now, 18 minutes left to make your bid for Christian Pulisic's chess football boots. We're also joined by Hans Niemann, who has made a great effort in the Charity Cup. Unfortunately, it ends here, but Hans Niemann, how do you feel about your performance?
Well, yeah, it's just it collapsed a bit at the end, but the first 2 games, the second game, I definitely should not have lost. With a little bit of precision in that end game, before I lost the c5 pawn, it probably would have led to just a repetition. I think this third game was just a bit of tilt, and it's very difficult to play Magnus in a match, especially when you're down a game. So perhaps that negatively affected my psychology. But I think I played very fighting chess, and I wanted to just play. I wasn't trying to just make draws, or I wanted to fight. And I guess I got 2 very fighting games where both were very interesting, but again, couldn't really keep my, let's say, focus together, maybe.
And do you feel big disappointment right now, or do you also feel some sort of pride? We talked about yesterday how far you've come with your chess over the past year.
Yeah, I think whenever you lose, there's definitely going to be disappointment. I don't think you can avoid that. But obviously losing to Magnus is not as painful as it would be to lose to anyone else. but I think I'm very happy to show some good chess, and I think I would just look at this as a reflection of my potential as a player, and I was able to play some very good and interesting chess throughout the event. So, there's some disappointment, but again, I have a long journey ahead in chess, so I should not be too disappointed. Just be optimistic about my future games.
Definitely. And, well, with the progress you made now in over only the past year, where will you be in 1 year? What should we expect?
I think at least 2,700. I can make that assurance. I think that's it. If I don't achieve that in the next year, I should be quitting chess, I think.
Now, in game 2, with the white pieces, we were crossing our fingers to see the Joe Bava London. You tried and then Magnus denied it. I think actually we see her reaction here. What were you thinking when Magnus didn't allow you to play it?
Well, technically I still could have played it, but it's sort of like not the counter to it, but I was actually still tempted to play in the knight c3, but when he played e6, I got the feeling that he was going to do something weird, something a little bit, slightly dubious. So I felt that maybe he would go for like the Dutch, as he did, or something not, let's say, so directly challenging. So I said, okay, I won't play the Drabava because it seems like he's ready to take some risk. And he did take some risk with his opening. And I got an opening advantage, but of course it's a very complex, intense position. But the thing is that I was undefeated with the Drabava London in this tournament. I should note that. I think that's the most important thing, that I won every game that I played with it. And I'm very excited for it to be released tomorrow.
It is to be released tomorrow. So Hans, thank you for your very entertaining play in the Charity Cup. And we're definitely looking forward to the course coming out tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us, Hans. All right, remember that, everyone. Put your clocks on. Hans Niemann's Chessable course coming out tomorrow, exclusively on Chessable. All right, jumping back into the drama. Ding Liren, he's up by 1 point. If he wins this game, he will be ready for the semi-final to face Magnus Carlsen. What's happening?
We've jumped in at a huge moment. Look at the clock times, first of all. Ding with 2 minutes, Jordan with under 30 seconds. Meanwhile, on the board as well, Ding slightly ahead. Ding has 2 pawns, and Jordan only has 1. So 2 versus 1 pawn advantage with knights on the board, making it a bit tricky, but it should be winning for white. Black's pawn in the center is actually a direct target for the white knight. It might fall off. Meanwhile, the 2 white pawns later on, they'll just hold each other's hands and guide themselves up the board. 2 connected pass pawns for white should win this game, but a little bit of work to be done, because if white allows the black knight to trade itself off, sacrifice itself for the 2 white pawns, it would be a draw. A knight alone can't deliver checkmate. So some hard work to be done, but Jovanka, what do you think? White win?
I think white will win this game. I was a little bit surprised by Ding marching the king up the board. I thought the king would perhaps go backwards and try to round up black's sole remaining pawn. But, he's focused on one thing, and that is promoting one of his 2 passed pawns. And it's difficult, actually, with the black king so far away, actually.
Yeah. And if the black king runs back around to try and stop these 2 white pawns, then the black remaining pawn
And only 2 seconds. I mean, he has to make a move.
Oh, wow.
Has he?
Did he run out of time there? Has he moved? Jordan, maybe we have a bit of a delay here. Neither player reacting, so I think the game's continuing. There we go.
Okay, pre-moving.
He did make a move. I think it was around 3 seconds left on the clock. And as mentioned, the black king is trying to make its way back over, but it was stopped. The black pawn just too weak, and white can even go pick it off now if he wants. He goes in with a check, and this is a double attack. The black pawn about to fall.
But knights are very tricky pieces, and especially they can check and move in circular ways. And here comes Jordan with his checks. So
slightly tricky. The white king either has to stay in contact with its own knight to protect it, or it has to attack the black knight. So only really a choice of a couple of squares here.
But even then, you have to be careful with where you put your king, because if you put it on the wrong square, black's knight could be moving to give a check.
Yeah. So okay,
Oh,
he doesn't allow any checks. He moves forward.
But then this was I was thinking you have to be careful.
Yeah, but now he's guarded his own knight. He's not allowing any checks. The black knight can hop towards the white pawns, but the white pawns are ready to run. They're ready to move, and unfortunately, it's just a one-move threat. I think black's king is just too far offside, and we might get a result any moment. Jordan, his body language shows he's lost hope. The white pawns are simply going to start running, and they will win the day. One of them is destined to become a queen for sure. And okay, he tries a few more moves. As Jovanka mentioned, knights are so tricky, so never resign if you have a knight. You might, your opponent might walk into a knight fork, but that knight is going in the wrong direction. And I would just move the white knight out of the way here, probably, just to make sure that it's not in contact with the black king. And,
it's a good strategy as well, and also means that you don't necessarily need to calculate every single check that the knight has.
Exactly.
So I agree with that. That's very practical. Move the knight out of the way, and then you can focus on the task of advancing those pawns on the right.
Yeah. You could also maybe step the white king back to the center, just back down one square. You want to avoid knight checks, and you don't want to allow the black knight to start coming for your pawns. So, yeah, Ding, with a minute and a half, this is enough time. It's a relatively simple position, not too many choices on every turn. So he should be able to convert this. He does indeed move his knight out of the way. So black's king now just feels a bit unemployed, not being able to join the action, not doing anything. Black's knight is fighting the battle alone, and this is one check, but the white king is just going to step
forward
in this direction. Slightly surprising, because I thought the black knight now can come after the white pawns, but nothing to worry about there. White king is going to step back now, or the white pawn is running. Okay. And yeah, this race is only going to end in one way.
Nicely calculated by Ding. You know, he's excellent at working everything out, and he's just figured out that knight takes pawn. The white pawn will just run to its destination, and it cannot be caught. And we have a result.
We do have
Ding
a result.
has won, and he is through to the semi-finals.
Jordan van Forest, he gives up. Ding Liren winning 2 games, and after only 3 games, he is ready for the semi-final. To face world champion Magnus Carlsen. We will have world number 1 against world number 3 in those semi-finals. That will be such a cool match. But first, David, this game, what happened? How did Ding eventually win it?
I just want to show the end. We were both impressed by Ding's final move, which did provoke resignation from Jordan van Forest, and it was here. The black knight actually attacking both white pawns. If it can eliminate both, it will be a draw, even at the cost of its own life. But the problem is here, white can run, and Ding did this immediately. He gave up the G-pawn, instead running with his corner pawn. And the point here is that knights are terrible at stopping pawns on the side of the board. That is because knights can only stop them from one side. And as we see here, black resigned because after knight takes pawn, there's no way to stop Harry the H-pawn from becoming a queen, from being promoted. For example, if the knight jumps back, the pawn steps forward and the race is lost. Black's king simply too far away, and one simple pawn wins the game.
Wow. And with another great win, Ding Liren is ready for the semi-finals. We are hoping to get a comment from him. We know it's very late for him in China. What will it be? 4 a.m. in the morning? Something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm dying to know how he's coping with playing so early in these early mornings. You know, how has his training been like? You know, whether he gets tired at the end, and how's he preparing for these tournaments?
Yeah.
It's good motivation for him, actually, to win matches quickly. Because imagine if there had been a 4th game, if there had been playoffs, he would have been playing at 5:30 in the morning. At least now, I mean, it's nearly 4, but at least now he could take a slightly earlier night.
Yeah.
So, yeah, impressive day for him, for Ding.
Definitely. And talking about clocks, the clock is ticking down in our auction for Christian Pulisic's very special, very unique chess, soccer or football boots, whatever you call them. 7 minutes left right now. And his soccer shoes, they actually have a specially engraved bishop on the heel because he's such a big chess fan. And this is definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get a pair of signed football shoes. The current bid is still $1,050 and 7 minutes left to place your bid. All the money in this auction goes, of course, to UNICEF, who is doing life-saving work in and around Ukraine. Currently a little over $80,000. We are aiming for $100,000 in our fundraiser. All right, waiting still for Ding Liren, hoping to get a comment from him. We will, of course, be quick. We know he needs to get some sleep. But, well, David, how excited is it? We will have now Magnus Carlsen against Ding.
Yeah, and remember Magnus's interview a couple of days ago. The only player he didn't want to face in the knockout is Ding. Ding beat him in the prelims. Ding has beaten him on a few occasions before over the board as well in playoffs. So this one is going to be really close. Ding, he's banging form now. So, yeah, I mean, I can't wait for some of the games. Magnus is going to have to be on top form if he wants to progress now to the
Definitely.
final.
And then we also tomorrow will have to talk a little bit about the whole situation, about the candidates. Will Ding be able to get a place in the candidates? Or will he not? Will he be given a chance to face Magnus Carlsen in the next World Championship match? That will be a big theme tomorrow. But this one is also could be about to be decided. David Navarra, he has to win this game to take it to tie breaks. And the bar is over to Liam's side.
The bar is on Black's side here, but it is quite complicated. If we do a quick count, if we jump into the position, Black is 1 pawn up. That's why the computer gives roughly a +1 advantage. But this last move from Liam, really nice, just to take all the sting out of White's attacking chances here. He's trying to swap the queens off. When you're 1 pawn up, when you're any material up, it makes a lot of sense to swap queens. So now this is a check hitting the White king, and the queen was under fire, so we saw a trade of those queens. Now Black's extra pawn should become a big factor. I don't think David Navarro is going to be able to win this one. Remember, he needs to win, but he's actually got a really difficult endgame to defend. Black's extra central pawn will become a big force.
Yeah.
And what do you think here?
I think it's an uphill struggle actually for David because, not just he's a pawn down, but I'm also looking at the clock situation as well. He's low on time, and also looking at his body language on the camera, I'm seeing that he's also visibly quite stressed about his position. So, yeah. I think the best that he can hope for is probably to draw, but a draw is insufficient. He needs to win. But then again, we have seen stranger things.
Yeah, we have seen big turnarounds on the Champions Chess Tour. We've seen mouse slips, we've seen loss on time, we've seen everything. So he'll keep playing, he'll keep looking for tiny chances here and there. But Liam, he's being ruthless at the moment. He just swapped a set of pawns, swapped off a set of knights as well. And then look where he's planted the Black Knight. The Black Knight is actually on an outpost in front of an isolated pawn. That Black Knight's never going to get evicted from this square, ever. And, the Black Rooks can trade off for the White Rooks. The Black King is going to centralize itself now, I'm pretty sure. And White has no targets. There are no weaknesses in the Black camp. That's the issue for Navarro, the clock, the material situation, lack of targets, lack of a plan. And, Black's Knight just too strong.
White does have one vague plan, and what that is at the right time to try to get a king to the center of the board to attack the knight. It's been prevented.
Yeah, Black
No
cutting
plan.
off on this e-file now, so the White king can never shift over to the left flank. And notice how White's rook can actually come up to the 7th rank, but every pawn is protected there, so Black's king will simply kick it away. And Liam just somehow this whole tournament he just feels in control. When he wants to draw, he does. When he wants to win, he more often than not does. He's only lost a couple of games, and those have been wild battles where he's been ambitious as well. So he's looking great so far, and maybe the underdog if he gets to the semi-finals. But he's shown he can beat anyone now, and Navarra struggling on time.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say one thing. It might be tempting to put the rook on the 7th row, but like you say, it can get kicked out. But if you try to maintain the rook on the 7th row, it can even potentially get trapped.
Yeah, maybe we can show this because in the current position, not many plans, as we mentioned, for White. One, it could be getting active with this piece. You can't really move your knight. There's nowhere good to jump to. You can't really move your king anymore. If you come across, you'll just walk into some nasty checks. So if you do indeed improve your rook, then, as Jovanka mentioned, it will just get kicked by the king. This rook, unfortunately, can't snack on this pawn, which is defended by the Black Knight in the center of the board. But if you try to maintain it, then, as you mentioned, this rook is lacking squares. It literally has nowhere to go to. And one idea could be maybe to lift the rook up the board for Black. And if White, again, just waits. Okay, we have seen this position.
We're seeing this. Oh, my goodness me.
Actually, maybe not lift the rook up the board because then White's rook can escape.
But you can put your rook defending the Okay, he's moved.
So not up here. He's moved his king across, and I think his intention is because he can have a draw if he wants to progress to the semi-finals. If the white king moves, the black rook will just challenge the white rook, and then if the white rook wants to keep itself on the board, the black rook will challenge it. And white definitely doesn't want the rooks off. This would be a draw.
But he can win on the spot now.
Now, how can he win, Jovanka?
Because he can, once the knight goes back, you can just protect your pawn with the rook.
Wow.
And the rook is trapped. And so now you're just... no, hang on a second. He's going to put his...
I guess the knight will come forward, stopping the black knight using the square. But at the very minimum, Jovanka...
You can just push your pawn, right?
Push which pawn?
B pawn.
Oh, push this pawn forward, yeah. I was going to say, at the very minimum, black only needs a draw, so you can bring the rook back where it came from, hit the white knight. The white knight has to move. You can't even defend it with your king right now because of a nasty trick. We talk about knight forks, rook takes knight, and look at this, a nasty knight fork hitting the white king and the white rook. And yeah, this is going to be the end of the line for David Navarra. In the current position, this is the move we're expecting. The rook to come to this square. Okay, he doesn't go for this, though. He goes for the line I mentioned, offering a trade of rooks. White is actually losing in the position, but the best, objectively, is to keep the rooks on the board, and that will only end in a draw. Let's go back to the players. We're going to see a result any moment now. And there we go. David Navarra has been eliminated, I think, with a draw. Liam progresses.
Wow, Liam Le, he just keeps up playing his fantastically impressive chess. 30 seconds left in the auction for the exclusive Christian Pulisic football shoes. And of course, we're hoping to get some words from Lie after another dominant performance, at least another fantastic performance.
Yeah, some wild games at the beginning, actually. Navarra did take one win, but in general, it did feel like Liam was in control. And even the last game, he could have maybe won if he wanted to.
Yeah. And what can you say about Liam's performance so far? I mean, is this definitely the best we've seen from him in the tour?
Yeah. No doubt about it. You know, he was so impressive in the preliminaries. You know, he had such good opening preparation. He had so many convincing games. And even Magnus Carlsen said that, you know, all eyes should have been on Liam. You know, he said that was the star performance. And it looks like he's carried it on here. You know, I have to say, you know, he lost one game against David Navarra, but that didn't bother him. He just came back and he won again with the white pieces. And I've been highly impressed by his play. And I do have to say one thing about David Navarra. He is a fantastic competitor. He's also one of the nicest guys you can ever find in the chess world. Such a gentleman. He even won a prize for it. So, you know, full credit for him for playing such fighting chess.
Absolutely, yeah. He's given us so much entertainment, David Navarra, as well. And actually, can you believe it, David? We still haven't seen tie breaks in this season's Meltwater Champions Chess Tour.
It was surprising. Last month at the Athens Masters, we were all expecting them, right?
Yeah.
There were so many close matches, but no tie breaks, no blitz, no Armageddon. In a way, it's disappointing. We love to see the adrenaline that the players, when they're racing against the clock. But again, today, that happened. And will we see them this tournament? That's a big question.
We have to. I mean, I think we will probably see them. You know, I remember last time we had our sweets ready. We were kitted for the long haul, but yeah, nothing came. But I reckon tomorrow's we're going to see a lot of big fights.
We will be ready for those tie breaks tomorrow, and we're joined by Liam Le, ready for semi-finals. Congratulations!
Hello, guys. Thank you very much.
You seem just to be so in control and playing some fantastic chess. What can you say about your performance, Liam?
Yeah, I'm very happy with how I play. I think I got to a very good start today. I outplayed David in the first game, and the second game was a bit shaky. Maybe I could have honed a couple of points, but I missed a lot of things in the second game. So once I strike back on the third game, I knew I only needed a draw in the last game, and that makes things a bit easier.
And of course, with the way you're playing in this tournament and in the preliminaries, we're calling you a favorite all the time here. How are you enjoying being a favorite going into these matches?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say I'm a favorite. I think my opponents are very well-respected players, and I think they are very dangerous too. So, but I think if I'm on a good form, I can put up a good fight against them. So I think the next match is against Duda, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so my score against Duda is, I think he still has +2 or +3, but he's a very interesting player, and I look forward to a big fight with him.
Yeah, I mean, what will be your strategy if you can reveal a little bit from your previous encounters with Jan-Krzysztof? What seems to be a good plan against him?
Well, at first I should just try to keep doing what I have been doing. So perhaps play a little bit fast and put pressure on them on the clock. And of course I have to be better prepared and probably have to study his games a little bit.
Of course, and well, doing that, will you do that together with your fantastic team at the Webster University? I'm hearing so many words from Jovanka and David about just how good that team effort is at the university you're teaching.
Yeah, I have a very good team here at Webster. They are not really helping me directly during the tournament, but I guess I also benefit from working with them on their openings. So it's kind of beneficial to all of us because I learned something from them and they also learned something from me, and we share some novelties, some ideas together. So having a team of strong GMs to work with is definitely a benefit of my job.
Yeah, and the way you're playing, Liam, it's just so fun to watch you, and so your games is so great. So how important as a chess player is it to play with confidence and to go into games feeling confident?
Yeah, I think having confidence is key, especially in faster time controls, because otherwise you could doubt yourself over and over again and waste valuable time on the clock. So you have to be confident and just trust your intuition and making reasonable move. You don't have to make the best move all the time, but you just have to make sound move and be ahead on the clock.
Yeah, sounds like a great plan. Liam, we're so happy for you making it to the semifinals and wish you best of luck tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, do you think Liam is now a favorite to win the whole thing, Jovanka?
Yeah, he's playing so well.
Yeah.
And I was thinking if he did, I don't know why, the thought occurred to me that if he did win this event, he's going to get such a high five from all his students when he walks into the
running
classroom.
through the hallway.
Yeah, on the Monday morning.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, coach.
Maybe
So I was going to say, the main problem, though, for Liam, he has to get past Duda first, a World Cup winner.
Yeah, that's true.
Then he has to get past Magnus or Ding, two of the best players in the world. So still up against it, despite the fact he's been the best player so far up to this point.
And, well, talking about that, David, let's take now a look at the bracket in the Charity Cup. These were our quarterfinals. Liam Le winning against David Navarra, Jan-Krzysztof Duda dominant against David Anton, Ding Liren in the late night in China won the match against Jordan van Forest, and Magnus Carlsen also after 3 games, the winner of the semi-quarterfinal match against Hans Niemann. So here are our semi-final matches. So, well, first of all, David, Liam Le against Jan-Krzysztof Duda. What should we expect from these two playing against each other?
I think it's going to be a lot of decisive games. I would be surprised if this one goes to tie breaks because they're both so ambitious. They both take games into really kind of weird, unusual waters to try and outwit the opponent. And I would say Liam is the slight favourite just because he's in great form, but Duda, as he showed in the World Cup, can beat anyone.
Definitely. And then world number 3 against world number 1. That will be a huge one, Jovanka. Ding against Magnus. What do you expect?
I suspect it might be a cagey affair, both sides like prodding each other just for that small edge. But we did see Ding beat Magnus Carlsen in a very sharp game, so maybe we'll see a return of that.
Magnus has huge respect for Ding Liren, right, David?
Yeah, Magnus, he's very honest. We've seen that throughout his career. And Ding is maybe one of the 2 or 3 players in the world that he does fear. So that says a lot about Ding's capabilities, his strengths, and yeah, it's definitely not going to be any easy games. That one's going to be decided by just 1 or 2 moves here and there. It's going to be super close.
Looking forward to semi-finals coming up tomorrow. And of course, we're going to keep up our fundraiser for UNICEF. And so far, you guys, together with all of you, the great chess community, we have been able to raise more than $80,000. That was our goal. So now we upped our goal to $100,000. Please keep on donating. Every single dollar of your hard-earned money is so much appreciated. Look at that. The donation bar is going up. And the Pulisic chess boots. Is it you that bought them, David?
Unfortunately not.
Let's see. They eventually went for, $1,050 to a lucky winner somewhere out there to get a specially signed chess boots by Christian Pulisic with that special chess piece on them. And, well, David, I guess you're going to go home and study Pulisic's chess game?
Quite possibly. I mean, I could learn a few things. I think a lot of our viewers could learn a few things from his game against Play Magnus there. Well, Magnus H10.
We've seen so much fun chess today. Great chess.
I know, it's been an exciting quarterfinals, and the semi-finals just going to be just as intense.
Yeah, it's coming up tomorrow, you guys. A big thank you also to all our partners for supporting us and also our fundraiser for UNICEF. Semi-finals coming up tomorrow. It's going to be fun. So hope to see you again tomorrow. Bye.